Arthur rules his world as an incredibly powerful king. He wears dark armor and a flowing red cape while wielding a massive glowing sword. He fights countless brutal battles and easily conquers his enemies. He proudly stands over his defeated foes and commands massive fleets of dark airships. These high-tech airships drop huge black bombs onto enemy cities. The bombs trigger massive explosions that completely destroy the skyscrapers below. Despite all his military victories and ultimate political power, Arthur feels entirely trapped. He views his royal life as a suffocating prison without any real freedom. He remembers a dark-haired woman named Cecilia lying dead in a pool of blood. He also constantly remembers the terrifying assassins trying to stab him in his sleep. He never gets a single moment of peace or genuine rest. Eventually, his life as a powerful king comes to an end. His soul drifts aimlessly through a dark void filled with rising luminous blue bubbles. A brilliant golden star suddenly expands and engulfs him in blinding white light. He then wakes up in a completely new world. He opens his eyes and quickly realizes he's now a helpless infant. A brown-haired man named Reynold and a reddish-brown-haired woman named Alice look down at him with huge smiles and joyful tears. They happily state that they are his new parents. They name the baby Arthur. Arthur quickly pieces the clues together and figures out he has reincarnated into a completely new life. He feels deeply frustrated by his new weak and powerless body. He hates having absolutely no control over his own tiny limbs. He even hates his basic physiological reflexes, like automatically grabbing his father's finger inside the wooden crib. His parents find these little actions incredibly adorable. He finds the whole experience deeply annoying and humiliating. He also absolutely despises the fact that he regularly poops his pants. Alice gladly changes his dirty diapers and takes great care of him without a single complaint. Arthur simply endures the daily humiliation and desperately wishes he could move around freely. Despite his severe physical limitations, Arthur keeps his mind razor sharp. He constantly observes his surroundings to learn everything he can about this strange new world. He soon discovers that supernatural powers exist here. One day, he watches his mother Alice use glowing green magical energy to heal his father's head. He also watches Reynold train outside in the lush green fields. Reynold wears spiked black and gold bracers and throws powerful punches bursting with explosive red energy. Reynold even fights massive, dark, bull-like monsters in the forest and returns home covered in blood. Arthur realizes this society allows individuals to freely wield highly dangerous weapons and powerful magic. He decides he must gain his own power as quickly as possible to survive and protect himself. He knows that knowledge is the ultimate weapon. He waits patiently for months until he finally learns how to crawl across the wooden floors. Once he can move on his own, he sneaks away from his parents and heads straight into the house's library. He uses his tiny baby body to pull a large, heavy green book off the wooden shelf. He sits on the floor, opens the book, and studies a detailed map of the continent. The massive continent is called Decathan. It consists of 3 major kingdoms. The Kingdom of Darv is an expansive network of underground passages where the Dwarven race resides. The Kingdom of Elenoir is a deep, lush forest territory inhabited exclusively by elves. The Kingdom of Sapin is the largest and most populated region on the map. Sapin is the primary land of humans, and Arthur quickly realizes this is exactly where he currently lives. He learns that Sapin operates under a traditional monarchy. Kingship here is directly inherited through royal bloodlines rather than violently taken by force like in his previous world. Arthur flips through more leather-bound books to understand the technological level of this society. He spots futuristic silver skyscrapers and flying vehicles in his memories, but this world is completely underdeveloped. He discovers that the existence of magic directly prevents technology from advancing. This world heavily relies on a mystical power called mana. Only about 1 in 100 people is born with the genetic ability to manipulate this mana. Arthur reads about the 2 main types of magic users. Augmenters use internal mana to physically enhance their bodies. This powerful technique gives them incredible strength, high defense, and extreme agility in close combat. Conjurers emit their mana into the outside world to bend their environment to their will and cast spells from a distance. A person absolutely needs a fully formed mana core to use any of these magical abilities. The book states that people usually awaken as mages and form their mana cores during early adolescence or their late teens. The difficult process involves gathering scattered pieces of mana inside the body and fusing them together into a solid core. Arthur instantly recognizes this biological concept. It sounds exactly like manipulating internal chi from his past life. He understands the mechanics of focusing internal energy perfectly. He wonders if his extensive past life experiences will give him an unfair advantage in this magical world. He decides to test his crazy theory immediately. He sits cross-legged on the wooden floor next to the bookshelf and closes his eyes. He focuses his mind deeply and searches for the tiny mana fragments hidden inside his baby body. He successfully locates the glowing golden energy resting near his stomach. He starts gathering the scattered mana into his center. Suddenly, Alice picks him up and completely interrupts his intense concentration. She notices him straining his face and immediately assumes he just pooped his diaper again. Arthur feels deeply embarrassed but accepts the diaper change without a fuss. He realizes he needs to be much more careful and hide his magical training from his protective parents. He continues to practice his mana gathering secretly every single day. 2 years quickly pass by. Arthur grows into a quiet but highly curious toddler. Alice writes in her journal about how much she absolutely loves him. She notes that Arthur never actually smiles or laughs. He simply observes everything around him with a very serious and analytical expression. One sunny afternoon, Reynolds decides to teach 2-year-old Arthur how to fight. He hands Arthur a wooden stick and shows him some basic sword swings in the yard. Arthur sits in the grass and holds the stick eagerly. Suddenly, Alice looks out the kitchen window and spots them. She storms outside in an absolute fury. She screams at Reynolds for putting their tiny baby in danger. Reynolds cowers in fear, sweats profusely, and apologizes immediately. He tries to explain that he just wants to teach the boy some useful combat skills. Alice completely refuses to listen and fiercely protects her child from the training. Arthur quietly watches the argument and easily figures out the power dynamic in the household. Alice is definitely the boss, and Reynolds is terrified of making her mad. Sometime later, the family takes a trip to a nearby bustling town. Arthur rides comfortably on Alice's back and carefully looks at the various shops along the cobblestone streets. This trip provides him with crucial information about the outside world's economy and culture. He closely examines the weapons displayed on the wooden walls of a local armory. He sees heavy axes, sharp swords, and spiked maces. He then looks at a merchant selling glowing, colorful crystals and light blue gems. A man in a dark cloak suddenly conjures swirling orange flames from his bare hand to demonstrate his fire magic. Arthur stares at the fire with intense fascination. He feels extremely lucky to witness real magic in person for the very first time. The town visit confirms everything he previously read in the history books. The sun sets, and Alice carries a sleepy Arthur back to their rural home. Arthur realizes his new parents truly care for him. He lacks his former royal freedom, but he genuinely appreciates their warmth and gentle care. Later that night, Alice puts Arthur to bed in his wooden room. She watches him sleep and thinks deeply about his future. She knows he has a wild, adventurous spirit just like his father. She remembers how his big blue eyes sparkled while looking at the deadly weapons and magic in town. Despite this obvious interest, she deeply hopes he will choose a peaceful and safe path in life. She just wants her cute little boy to stay out of harm's way and live a normal life. The very next day, Arthur watches his father practice martial arts in the grassy yard. Reynolds performs high kicks and powerful punches against the air. His fast movements create intense shockwaves of red and blue energy that send dirt and debris flying into the sky. Arthur carefully observes Reynolds' combat techniques and confirms that his father is definitely an augmenter. He studies the physical enhancements and tries to memorize the flow of energy. Alice eventually interrupts the observation and tells Arthur it is time for his daily nap. Arthur begs to read a book instead. He gives her a wide-eyed, sparkling look to manipulate her. Alice tries to resist but quickly gives in to his incredibly cute face. She allows him to read for a little bit longer. Arthur immediately goes to the massive bookshelf and sits quietly on the floor. He closes his eyes and resumes his secret magic training. He knows he has gathered incredible knowledge and experience over the past 2 years. He is finally ready to complete his ultimate goal. He prepares to form his mana core much earlier than anyone else in history. He concentrates all the scattered mana fragments inside his body. He forces them into one single tight location in his chest. The process requires tremendous focus and physical effort. A glowing yellow light begins to manifest around his hands and stomach. He pushes himself to the absolute limit. He successfully merges the final mana fragment into the core. Suddenly, a massive explosion of pure magical energy erupts directly from his tiny body. The devastating blast completely destroys the wooden house. Fire and thick black smoke billow high into the sky. Splintered wooden debris flies everywhere across the lush grassy hills. Reynolds and Alice happen to be standing outside on a dirt path when the sudden explosion occurs. Reynolds instantly shields Alice from the flying wreckage. He takes a severe burn to his back, but successfully keeps her safe from the blast. As the thick smoke clears, Alice realizes Arthur is still inside the ruined house. She panics intensely and screams his name in terror. Reynolds drops everything and sprints recklessly toward the burning rubble. He runs through the destroyed doorway and stares in absolute shock. The wooden ceiling is completely shattered and open to the sky. He fully expects to find his son severely injured or even dead. Instead, he sees 3-year-old Arthur floating high in the air above the smoking wreckage. A brilliant aura of golden and blue energy surrounds the boy's entire body. Arthur opens his eyes and smiles brightly for the first time. He has successfully awakened his magic and perfectly formed his mana core. The immense power temporarily levitates him in the air. The glowing aura slowly fades, and Arthur begins to fall toward the dangerously splintered wooden floor. He suddenly realizes he exhausted all his energy during the awakening. He braces for a painful impact and genuinely thinks his life might end right there. Suddenly, Reynold lunges forward with glowing red hands. He catches Arthur safely and simultaneously lifts a massive falling wooden beam. He uses his incredible augmenter strength to shield his wife and son from the collapsing roof. The dust finally settles inside the completely ruined house. Reynold and Alice huddle tightly on the floor with Arthur safely tucked in their arms. Alice cries uncontrollably and hugs Arthur as tight as she possibly can. She has minor scratches all over her face, but she doesn't care at all. She is just incredibly relieved that her baby is alive and unharmed. Reynold also breaks down into heavy tears. He smiles warmly and expresses his deep gratitude for Arthur's safety. Arthur looks up at his parents in complete surprise. He sees the genuine, unconditional love pouring from their tearful eyes. In his past life as a king, he only knew the cold duty of royal guards and a constant threat of deadly assassins. He never experienced true affection, comfort, or genuine worry from anyone. He never knew what it meant to have people cry tears of absolute joy just because he survived an accident. He looks at his crying mother and his smiling father. He finally understands the true meaning of having a real family. He realizes that this warm, protective love is something he could never learn from reading a book. He fully embraces his new life, his loving parents, and the incredible magical power he has just successfully awakened. However, despite his completely new and happy life, Arthur's memories occasionally drift back to his time as King Grey. He thinks about a specific day when an assassin tried to take his life. The young man is caught and forced to kneel on the floor of a dark room while flanked by armored guards. The assassin is sentenced to immediate execution for his grave crime, but the ruling council decides to show him mercy. They declare that he and his family will be escorted back to their home country to await their final sentencing. The assassin begs Arthur to spare his wife and child, claiming that returning home would mean a fate far worse than death. He fully accepts his own severe punishment, but desperately pleads for King Grey to let his family live. Arthur coldly tells the man to know his place and declares that his judgment has already been passed. The assassin's wife and child cry out in absolute terror. Suddenly, Arthur draws his sword and executes the woman and child himself, leaving their bloodied bodies on the floor. He claims this brutal act is true mercy because he just spared them from endless suffering. The assassin looks up at Arthur with tears streaming down his face and genuinely thanks the king for killing them. Back in the present, Arthur is now 4 years old and spending his days outside his family's rural cottage. Reynold tries to give Arthur a heavy spiked black gauntlet with gold trim so he can fight just like his father. Alice immediately storms out of the house and completely shuts the idea down. Reynold admits the weapon would probably get Arthur killed before he even got into striking range anyway, so they decide to use regular wooden practice swords instead. Arthur and Reynold face off in the lush green field. Reynold challenges his son to come right at him, and Arthur charges forward with incredible speed. He swings his wooden sword, and the blade suddenly ignites with glowing orange mana. He leaps high into the air and strikes Reynold's arm with a powerful fiery blow. The wooden sword falls to the grass, and Arthur excitedly asks his father how he did. Reynold praises his son, but realizes Arthur's talent is growing way too fast for him to handle alone. Inside the house, Reynold tells Alice that Arthur needs a proper mentor. Alice absolutely refuses to send her 4-year-old son to some faraway town on his own. Reynold argues that Arthur is a literal prodigy who easily cuts through mana-reinforced wood, making a real teacher essential for his future. Alice remains totally stubborn and tearfully hugs Arthur on the floor, absolutely refusing to let him go. Reynold gets frustrated and tries to reason with her, pointing out that her wild emotions are narrowing her perspective. They argue back and forth loudly until Alice suddenly suggests a simple compromise where the entire family moves to the city together. Reynold instantly agrees, and they joyfully start packing their bags for a new life, completely thrilled about the journey. A few days later, the family gathers near the dirt path outside their home. 2 large wagons pulled by giant green lizard creatures wait for them. Arthur formally introduces himself to the group of adventurers hired to escort them to a major city called Xyrus. The adventurers are the Twin Horns, the exact same party Reynold and Alice used to travel with back in the day. Adam Crinch introduces himself as a spearman with a giant scar across his nose. Angela Rose calls Arthur incredibly cute and hugs him so tight he can barely breathe. Durden Walker shakes Arthur's tiny hand, while Jasmine Flansworth simply stares at him in silence. Helen Shard completes the group and warmly welcomes Arthur to the journey. The caravan sets off along the dirt path. Arthur sits inside the wooden wagon with his mother and looks out at the towering white cliffs. He thinks about how primitive this lizard-drawn carriage is compared to the flying futuristic vehicles from his past life, but he still finds the whole experience rather charming. As they travel through a lush forest, the group decides to stop and set up camp. Adam mentions the deadly dangers of this world just as a huge pack of massive gray wolves surrounds their campsite. Arthur and Alice hide inside the dark wagon while the Twin Horns spring into action. Jasmine charges forward with her twin daggers and swiftly slashes several wolves to pieces in the blink of an eye. Reynold joins the fight and punches a wolf right in the jaw, sending blood flying. Adam easily impales another beast with his spear. Helen stands on top of the wagon and shoots arrows with perfect accuracy. Arthur watches the chaotic battle closely and notes that Adam, Helen, and Jasmine are all augmenters who use internal magic to enhance their physical attacks. Durden steps up and blasts the remaining wolves with a massive yellow energy explosion. Angela follows up by casting a glowing green magical barrier from her staff that completely knocks out the last wolf. Arthur realizes that Durden and Angela are conjurers who cast spells from a distance. The fight ends very quickly, and Arthur feels determined to reach their level of skill as soon as possible. That night, the group sits around the blazing campfire eating roasted meat skewers. Arthur feels full and stares blankly at the fire. Alice notices a bloody wound on Reynold's arm from the wolf fight. She immediately uses glowing green magic to heal his injury completely. Arthur realizes his mother is an emitter, a highly rare type of mage with powerful healing abilities. He understands that her valuable skills make her a massive target, which is exactly why she and Reynold lived in hiding out in the country all these years. After the healing is done, Adam confidently asks to borrow Arthur for some light exercise. Arthur grabs a wooden sword and steps into the dark field to face Adam. He knows Adam has no intention of holding back despite Arthur being only 4 years old. Adam readies his cloth-wrapped spear, and Arthur unleashes a huge burst of green magical energy from his legs to boost his speed. He charges at Adam with his glowing orange sword. The two clash violently in the middle of the field. Sparks fly as Arthur tries his absolute best to keep up with the seasoned warrior. He puts up a great fight, but his tiny toddler body is simply too light to handle the impact. Adam deflects a heavy blow and sends Arthur flying backward high into the air. Angela quickly casts a green magic bubble to catch Arthur safely before he hits the ground. The rest of the group harshly scolds Adam for going too hard on a child, but Adam defends himself by calling Arthur a little monster. Later that night, Jasmine approaches Arthur and demands to know how he fights like that. Arthur recognizes the intense look in her eyes and knows she will never stop bothering him until she gets a real answer. The journey continues smoothly over the next few weeks. The caravan travels along steep, rocky cliffs under bright orange sunsets. During their rest stops, Arthur spends all his free time training with every single member of the Twin Horns. He does push-ups with Durden, practices his archery with Helen, and continuously spars with Adam. He also shares his past life combat knowledge with Jasmine, teaching her completely new ways to move and fight. Jasmine quickly masters a technique that allows her to glide incredibly fast across the grass using green wind magic. One evening, Arthur sits alone by the campfire reading a massive green book. Jasmine walks up and hands him a small sheathed dagger as a gift for his birthday and a thank you for his lessons. Arthur is genuinely surprised and thanks her for the weapon. The rest of the Twin Horns watch from afar and joke about how Jasmine never warms up to anyone like that. As they prepare to leave the campsite the next morning, Alice watches Arthur and suddenly starts crying. Arthur asks what is wrong, but she quickly wipes her tears and claims she is just fine with a gentle smile. The caravan resumes its journey along a narrow, dusty path overlooking a massive canyon. Arthur sits in the wagon reading his book when suddenly a huge volley of arrows rains down from the rocky cliffs above. Adam and the others quickly take defensive stances. A massive group of masked bandits completely surrounds them on the high ground. The bandit leader, a giant muscular man with a massive axe, orders his men to capture the women and the child alive because they are worth way more money on the black market. Durden immediately raises his magical scepter and casts a blinding white light that completely engulfs the entire mountain path. The sudden flash temporarily blinds the bandits, giving the twin horns a desperate chance to strike back. The bandits slide down the steep cliffs to engage the travelers in brutal close combat. Arthur watches from the wagon as the chaotic battle unfolds. Durden blasts enemies with explosive yellow energy, while Adam and Jasmine slice through the attackers with their weapons. Helen fires arrow after arrow, taking down bandits before they even reach the ground. Despite the twin horns' incredible combat skills, the sheer number of bandits easily overwhelms them. A wounded Reynold gets thrown backward through a shattered wooden cart. He crashes to the dirt right in front of Alice and Arthur. A massive bandit approaches them with a club, but Reynold quickly stands up to block his path. Reynold is bleeding heavily from his shoulder but absolutely refuses to let anyone touch his family. He commands Alice to take Arthur and run away immediately. Alice argues that she is strong enough to fight too, but Reynold strictly forbids it. He tells Arthur to use his strength to protect his mother because she is going to have another baby. Arthur is completely shocked by the news that his mother is pregnant. He suddenly understands why Alice was acting so weird and emotional earlier. Reynold smiles at Arthur and says he's counting on his big brother to keep them safe. Reynold then charges directly at the bandit leader. He covers his fists in glowing pink energy and delivers a massive punch to the leader's face. The battle rages on, and Alice grabs Arthur's hand to flee the area as fast as possible. As they run across the dusty terrain, a hooded bandit mage standing on a high rocky ledge spots them escaping. The mage raises his wand and summons a massive vortex of swirling green wind magic. The powerful tornado strikes the cliffside and completely engulfs Alice and Arthur. The sheer force of the wind blows them right off the edge of the steep cliff. Alice desperately reaches out and manages to catch Arthur in midair. They both start plummeting toward the dense forest far below. Arthur quickly calculates the terrible situation and realizes that Alice absolutely cannot survive the fall if she is holding his extra weight. He knows he has to make a split-second choice. He pulls out the dagger Jasmine gave him, which is attached to a long, thin wire. He uses the wire to violently anchor himself to a sharp rock on the cliff face. The sudden tension rips him out of Alice's arms, saving her life by altering her trajectory toward a much safer landing spot. Arthur loses his grip on the wire and falls backward into the empty sky. As he plummets toward the ground at terminal velocity, he feels a strange sense of peace. He thinks back to his past life and the assassin who begged for his family's safety. He finally understands why the man was perfectly willing to die and why his family cried so hard for him. Arthur realizes that true family love involves sacrificing yourself without a single second thought. He closes his eyes and sheds a single tear, feeling incredibly happy that he was at least going to be an older brother. He completely embraces his fate and falls into the darkness. Sometime later, Arthur slowly wakes up in a completely unfamiliar place. A mysterious voice greets him and wishes him a good morning. Arthur wakes up after his massive fall from the cliff and realizes he somehow managed to survive the deadly drop. He finds himself entirely alone in a dark, rocky cavern and feels completely confused about his current location. Suddenly, he spots a massive, terrifying demon lurking in the shadows of the cave. The creature is clad in dark spiked armor, possesses giant curved horns, and has menacingly glowing red eyes and a jagged mouth. Arthur instantly panics, assuming the beast is going to kill and eat him. He tries to defend himself by throwing a desperate punch, but his tiny, battered body is way too weak and he ends up falling flat on the hard stone floor. The giant demon easily catches him and surprisingly tells Arthur that there is absolutely no need to be afraid because it is actually on his side. The creature points out that Arthur needs to recover from his severe physical injuries and casually places a pile of glowing yellow fruits on the ground right in front of him. Arthur is totally shocked by the monster's unexpected peaceful behavior, but he decides to trust it and takes a big bite of the glowing fruit. The taste is absolutely horrendous, causing Arthur to burst into tears and wail loudly, but he forces himself to keep chewing and swallowing because he knows he desperately needs his strength to heal. While he eats the terrible fruit, Arthur immediately asks the demon if his parents managed to survive the brutal bandit attack on the mountain pass. The demon uses its powerful magic to open a glowing viewing portal in the cave. The vision displays a stony path littered with the bloody corpses of the bandits, proving that the attackers were defeated. The demon informs Arthur that his family is completely safe and already continued their journey days ago. Arthur is incredibly relieved to hear that Reynold and Alice are alive and well, shedding heavy tears of absolute joy. He wipes his face and politely thanks the demon for the information. The terrifying creature then formally introduces herself to the young boy as Sylvia. Days pass in the isolated underground cave. Arthur's severe physical wounds eventually heal completely, and he becomes incredibly anxious to return home to his family. However, Sylvia explains that they are currently located deep within the Elshire Forest, a highly dangerous region filled with deadly wild animals and ruthless outlaws. She tells him that getting him out of the forest by creating a magical spatial breach requires a massive amount of preparation, so he is going to be stuck living with her for quite a while. Despite her terrifying demonic appearance that constantly makes Arthur jump in fear, Sylvia acts incredibly warm, gentle, and kind toward him, and the two quickly form a very close bond. To pass the time and prepare his body for the dangers ahead, Arthur starts doing physical training by swinging a simple wooden stick around the cavern. During his daily practice, Arthur decides to sit on a pile of rocks and meditate. He begins glowing with a brilliant yellow light, revealing to Sylvia that he has already successfully formed a manicore at his remarkably young age. Sylvia is genuinely impressed by his prodigy-level talent and decides to teach him a highly advanced magical technique to expand his abilities. She raises her massive clawed hand and manifests a brilliant, swirling orb of multicolored light. She demonstrates how to gather raw mana directly from the surrounding environment while simultaneously using it to cast a spell. Arthur immediately grasps the concept, realizing this is exactly like refueling an airplane in midair. He notes that human mages typically separate gathering mana and casting spells into two completely different steps. Sylvia explains that while humans struggle immensely with this multitasking concept, mana beasts do it as naturally as breathing. She offers to teach Arthur this incredibly powerful skill so he can become even stronger, but she first demands to know what he actually intends to do with such immense power once he acquires it. Arthur immediately thinks back to his violent past life as King Grey and the recent horrific bandit ambush that nearly killed his helpless parents. Filled with dark thoughts, he firmly states that he wants to gain enough power to deliver death to anyone who seeks to deprive him of the things he cares about. Sylvia instantly rejects his answer, completely disappointed by his bloodthirsty and vengeful mindset. She tells him he failed her test and states she will never teach someone with such a hateful look on their face. She then uses her physical power to quickly knock him unconscious. When Arthur finally wakes up on the cold, icy cave floor, he angrily argues with Sylvia, shouting that killing enemies is just how the world works and the only practical way to become a powerful king. Sylvia remains perfectly calm and gently strokes his reddish-brown hair with her massive, deadly claws. She explains that her giant hands could easily tear him to shreds in a second, but they can also provide comfort and warmth. She asks him which touch he prefers, and Arthur admits he prefers the gentle one. Sylvia warns Arthur that letting rage and hatred consume his heart might feel good and satisfying in the heat of the moment, but it will ultimately leave him completely empty and miserable in the end. She pleads with him not to waste the precious second chance at life she saved him for on a dark path of endless violence. Sylvia asks the crucial question one more time, wanting to know what he will truly use his new strength for. Arthur takes a moment to reflect on the genuine love he receives from his parents and the close bonds he recently formed with his adventurer friends. He remembers smiling with his father, learning from Jasmine, and traveling safely with Adam, Helen, Durden, and Angela. He completely changes his answer, telling Sylvia that he simply wants to protect the people he deeply cares about. Sylvia is absolutely thrilled by his response and praises him, calling it the perfect answer. As Arthur continues his intense magical training in the cave, he frequently experiences vivid flashbacks to his previous life as King Grey. He remembers sitting on a throne, feeling like little more than a living weapon for his country. He recalls how politicians in the parliament manipulated him to fight endless wars to secure wealth as his nation's resources rapidly ran dry and birth rates declined. An elderly man named Marlin had openly called him a killing machine, making Grey realize he was totally done with that miserable life. Grey had desperately desired absolute control over his internal Kai to maintain his strength and keep winning his battles. Using those intense memories of struggle and his past combat experience fighting a massive, armored, pig-masked monster in a sandy wasteland, Arthur pushes his tiny body to the absolute limit. He focuses intensely on his mana core and finally manages to gather mana while using it simultaneously. A brilliant, radiant purple aura instantly surrounds his entire body, proving that he has successfully mastered Sylvia's highly advanced magical technique. Sylvia warmly praises his incredible progress, but their peaceful training session is abruptly interrupted. A menacing, dark-armored monster with glowing blue eyes suddenly breaches the cavern. The dark creature tracks Sylvia down using the scent of her blood and demands she come along with him immediately. Sylvia completely refuses to surrender and tells Arthur to hide behind the rocks and stay perfectly quiet. The dark monster immediately launches a powerful attack, forcing Sylvia to drop her restrictive demonic disguise. A massive explosion of swirling blue and teal energy fills the cave, completely blinding the attacker. When the radiant light fades, Sylvia reveals her true form as a majestic, giant white dragon with large curved horns, long flowing white hair, and striking calm purple eyes. The dark monster is completely shocked that Sylvia would risk using so much of her restricted power, warning her that doing so will rapidly shorten her remaining lifespan. Sylvia boldly declares that she doesn't care about dying because she genuinely enjoyed her happy time living with Arthur. She opens her jaws and unleashes a massive, devastating beam of radiant blue energy directly at the dark attacker. A colossal battle ensues, utterly destroying the rocky cavern with massive explosions of purple and blue magic. Falling debris and thick dust fill the air as the two powerful beasts clash. Eventually, the smoke clears, and Arthur peeks out from his hiding spot to see the devastating aftermath of the fight. The dark monster stands victorious over the battlefield, while Sylvia lies severely injured on the broken stone ground. She has deep wounds, and glowing orange markings are rapidly spreading across her neck and torso as her blood pools around her head. Knowing her time is completely up, Sylvia calls Arthur over to her side. Arthur quickly runs to her, completely heartbroken to see his massive friend dying on the floor. Sylvia uses the last of her strength to create a vibrant, swirling spatial portal for Arthur to escape through. She reminds him of his solemn promise to always protect his loved ones and tells him it is finally time to say their goodbyes. Before he leaves, Sylvia gives Arthur two very special parting gifts. A glowing, multicolored, egg-like orb magically emerges from her chest. She wraps it carefully in a pure white feather and hands it to Arthur, strictly instructing him to keep it safe. Then, she touches his arm, transferring a glowing orange magical mark onto his skin that slowly spreads beneath his shredded sleeve. Arthur desperately asks what the mysterious mark is, but Sylvia simply smiles and says he will understand its purpose when the time is right. Arthur adamantly refuses to leave her behind and begs Sylvia to come through the escape portal with him. He screams that he doesn't care if she is a dragon or a terrifying monster because she is his family and he deeply cares about her. He tearfully calls her his grandma, completely rejecting the idea of abandoning her to die alone in the dark cave. Sylvia is deeply moved by his emotional words and sheds a single tear from her purple eye. She warmly thanks her newly adopted grandson for bringing so much happiness and light into her final days. With a heavy heart, she uses her magic to forcefully push Arthur into the swirling, colorful portal, sending him away to safety against his will. As Arthur disappears into the cosmic void, the dark monster slowly approaches Sylvia's fallen body, arrogantly mocking her for finally giving up the fight. However, Sylvia simply opens her purple eyes, looks directly at the dark creature, and unleashes a massive, blinding explosion of raw blue energy that completely engulfs the entire cavern, destroying the enemy and herself in the process. While floating helplessly through the colorful, shimmering cosmic void, Arthur hears Sylvia's gentle voice echoing clearly in his mind. She explicitly addresses him as King Grey, revealing that she secretly knew about his past life the entire time they were together. She begs him not to let his new life be consumed by the same hatred, sorrow, and endless violence that completely ruined his previous existence. She tells him to take his journey one step at a time and wishes for his new life to be filled with brilliant light and true happiness. Arthur cries silently as he floats horizontally toward a massive bright light at the end of the void. He eventually wakes up lying on the soft grass of a lush green forest clearing under a bright blue sky. He immediately checks his side and finds the white feather bundle containing the mysterious dragon egg safely resting right next to him on the grass. Realizing that Sylvia truly sacrificed her own life so he could live, Arthur wipes away his tears and fully accepts her final wish. He carefully picks up his small bag, turns his back to the sunny clearing, and looks out into the dense, highly dangerous forest with a fiercely determined and serious expression, fully prepared to face whatever challenges lie ahead on his long journey back to his family. Arthur runs through the lush green Elshire forest using his green wind magic to move at incredible speeds. He quickly stops when he hears voices nearby and spots a group of heavily armed slavers gathered around a horse-drawn carriage. He looks down from a high tree branch and sees a large man in a fur-trimmed purple coat forcefully covering the mouth of a crying, silver-haired elf girl named Tessia. The slavers laugh and talk about how much money they will make by selling her as a slave because elf girls fetch a ridiculously high price on the black market. Arthur briefly remembers Sylvia's lessons about controlling his negative emotions and avoiding unnecessary bloodshed, but he decides he simply cannot just walk away and let them take an innocent child. He patiently stalks the caravan from the shadows, carefully watching their movements and waiting for the absolute perfect time to strike. Night eventually falls, and the slavers set up their camp in a dark clearing under a starry sky. Arthur notices they use glowing magical bonds to control their large, scary, antlered forest hounds. He decides to use the restless hounds to create a major distraction. Arthur sneaks around the dark woods and throws several small seed-like projectiles directly at the beasts, causing them to howl loudly and completely agitate the slavers. One of the annoyed slavers leaves the warmth of the campfire and goes over to violently kick the hounds to shut them up. Arthur uses this perfect opportunity to sneak up on the isolated slaver in the thick night mist. He uses his glowing red energy to overpower the muscular man in an instant and quickly steals his hunting knife. Another slaver soon comes looking for his missing friend, complaining about the delay. Arthur swiftly ambushes him from the shadows and takes him down as well. Arthur feels completely exhausted and out of breath because fighting in his small, untrained child body is extremely draining on his stamina, but he absolutely knows he has to finish the job to keep Tessia safe. He presses forward and attacks a third bald slaver from behind with a glowing blue magical sword, leaving him bleeding out on the rocky ground. The loud commotion finally alerts the leader of the slavers, a scarred man with long dark hair wearing a heavy fur-trimmed purple coat. The leader steps out of his tent, sees the carnage, and quickly realizes Arthur is a young kid mage. He gets incredibly greedy and decides Arthur is a golden ticket, planning to capture him alive to sell for an even higher price than the elf girl. The leader aggressively unleashes a massive blast of pinkish-red fire magic directly at Arthur. Arthur narrowly dodges the huge explosion and lands safely on the grassy slope. The scarred man becomes completely enraged, charges forward, grabs Arthur by the shirt, and violently hurls him through the air toward a large structure. Arthur skillfully recovers his balance mid-air, tightly grips his stolen knife, and charges right back at the angry leader. They engage in a fierce, fast-paced struggle in the dark, rocky forest. Arthur smartly sets up a thin wire trap between the trees to trip the scarred man. The leader easily spots the wire, completely mocks Arthur's desperate tricks, and violently kicks him away into the dirt. The leader confidently tells Arthur to just give up because he absolutely does not stand a chance against a grown man. Arthur fiercely refuses to back down, reaches out, and touches the leader's leg to unleash a highly condensed burst of fire magic. The intense flames quickly engulf the scarred man, leaving him severely burned and screaming in intense, agonizing pain. The leader completely loses his temper, abandons his plan to capture the boy alive, and decides he is just going to brutally kill Arthur and sell his corpse to twisted magical collectors instead. He angrily prepares another massive magical strike, but Arthur reacts much faster. Arthur heavily throws his knife with incredible precision and speed, embedding the blade directly into the leader's bleeding forehead. The scarred man screams in absolute agony one last time and collapses dead on the dark forest floor. The bald slaver who survived the earlier sword attack terrifiedly begs Arthur for his life. Arthur shows absolutely no mercy and coldly points out that the little elf girl probably begged them for her life too, clearly indicating he won't spare him. With the dangerous slavers permanently defeated, Arthur enters a dark wooden storage room and finds Tessia sitting among the large crates, blindfolded and trembling in absolute fear. He gently tells her it is completely safe to come out now and that she can finally go home. When they step outside into the night, Tessia looks at Arthur's minor cuts and bruises and is completely shocked to realize her brave savior is just a small child her own age. Arthur quickly covers the dead bodies of the slavers and sets up a makeshift stone memorial to completely shield Tessia from the gruesome reality of the bloody battle. He smoothly lies to her, saying the bad men just had an unfortunate accident and will never be able to bother her again. Arthur puts on a large brown backpack, tells Tessia it was really nice meeting her, and turns to walk away so he can find his own family. Tessia immediately panics, grabs his sleeve tightly, and starts crying hysterically. She loudly begs him not to abandon a delicate little girl all alone in the terrifying woods. Arthur assumes an elf should naturally know exactly how to navigate their own forest, but Tessia embarrassingly admits she got completely lost while chasing some bugs and has absolutely no idea which way is home. Arthur sighs and realizes he has absolutely no choice but to physically escort her back to her family. Before they leave the camp, Tessia strongly insists they free the captive forest hounds. She explains that the elves deeply cherish all life and the poor beasts will starve to death if they just leave them tied up in the dark. Arthur strongly worries the giant hounds might immediately attack them once freed, but Tessia confidently assures him they were just being forcefully controlled by the bad men's magic. Arthur reluctantly agrees, and they set the massive animals completely free. They start walking along a rocky cliffside path, and Tessia formally introduces herself as Tessia Erlith. Arthur gives her his full name as well. They stop to make a small campfire, and Arthur cooks a simple meal of boiled jerky in a pan. Tessia takes a bite and makes a highly disgusted face because the food is extremely bland without any proper herbs. Arthur strictly tells her she absolutely needs to eat anyway to keep her energy up for the long walk, briefly remembering how Sylvia used to force him to eat terrible-tasting glowing fruit for his own healing. As they continue walking through the lush green forest, they happily talk about their respective homes. Tessia excitedly explains she lives in the elf kingdom of Elenoir and spends most of her time heavily supervised by her grandpa and caretakers because her parents are incredibly busy with important work. Arthur quietly suspects she might belong to a very wealthy or highly royal family based on how sheltered she acts. Tessia spots some glowing yellow bugs flying around them and explains her people constantly use them to easily mark paths in the woods. She playfully asks Arthur if he wants to catch one and wear it as an earring. Arthur quickly declines the offer and mentally notes that he really needs to study Tessia closely and learn how to act more like a normal child to blend in. Night falls again, and they set up a small dark tent at the base of a massive tree trunk. Arthur firmly tells Tessia to sleep inside while he stays outside to keep a strict watch. Tessia gets incredibly scared of the dark woods and desperately tries to convince Arthur to sleep inside the tent with her. She claims she is definitely not scared of ghosts, but is just highly worried that wild beasts will easily spot him if he stays outside alone. She also mentions her grandpa strictly warned her that human men are all highly dangerous perverts who have multiple wives. Arthur gets extremely offended by the wild accusation and explains that only a few wealthy aristocrats actually have multiple wives. He bluntly asks Tessia if she even knows what a pervert actually is, and she embarrassingly admits she has absolutely no idea. Arthur finally gives up arguing and agrees to stay inside the tent, and Tessia quickly falls asleep under her warm blanket. Arthur sits quietly in the dark tent and finds it highly amusing to finally experience what having a little sister actually feels like. The next day, they wade across a sparkling turquoise stream surrounded by large mossy rocks. Suddenly, Arthur experiences an unbearable, agonizing pain fiercely radiating directly from his newly formed manicore. He completely collapses onto the dirt floor, sweating profusely, clutching his chest, and intensely struggling to breathe under the massive weight of his heady backpack. Tessia totally panics and frantically asks if he is okay. She immediately offers to run off and find some magical medicinal herbs to quickly help his stomachache. Arthur completely stops her because he knows the dangerous forest is way too deadly for her to wander around alone. He decides to lie and firmly tells her he is perfectly fine, so she absolutely does not worry about his worsening physical condition. While Arthur rests exhausted against a large mossy tree trunk, a massive gray wolf suddenly approaches them from the thick bushes. It is one of the very same forest hounds they mercifully freed the night before. The giant wolf proudly drops a large dead boar right in front of Arthur and calmly walks away into the trees. Tessia happily points out that the wolf is directly repaying them for their good deeds. That night, they sit around a crackling campfire and cook the tender boar meat on wooden skewers. Tessia successfully finds some highly nutritious mushrooms to perfectly go with the hearty meal and happily eats her food. She talks extensively about her comfortable life in Elenoir and mentions that her frequent bedtime stories always feature highly evil people from the human and dwarf kingdoms, which is exactly why all elves absolutely do not trust humans. Arthur quietly listens but is way too completely exhausted from his intense internal core pain to keep the casual conversation going. He quietly passes out right there in the dark tent. The very next morning, Arthur surprisingly wakes up to find Tessia actively carrying him on her back. She smartly placed him inside his own large backpack carrier to easily transport him through the dark, misty forest path. Arthur feels incredibly embarrassed about being so physically weak, but Tessia cheerfully tells him it is totally fine. Tessia asks if she can officially start calling him Art since they are close friends now. Arthur gives a very dry, sarcastic response, so she gets highly annoyed. He jokingly calls her Your Highness Tessia, and she playfully scolds him for constantly making bad jokes exactly like a grumpy old man. They continue to banter back and forth as they walk much deeper into the misty woods. Eventually, they arrive at the thick base of a massive, ancient tree that prominently features a brilliant, glowing green portal of magical light. Tessia excitedly announces that they have finally reached her actual home. She steps directly into the intense magical green light without any hesitation at all. Arthur quickly follows his new friend right into the glowing teleportation gate, completely unaware that a mysterious voice instantly detects that the restricted portal has just been activated. As soon as Arthur and Tessia step through the portal, they are immediately surrounded by heavily armed elf soldiers in blue uniforms. The guards instantly assume the worst and aggressively grab Tessia by the shoulders to pull her away from Arthur. They draw their swords and declare that Arthur is a filthy human who must have brainwashed the young elf girl to trespass into their secret kingdom. The guards prepared to execute him right there on the spot. Tessia completely panics and desperately shouts at the guards to stop and let Arthur go, explaining that he is actually her savior and not a dangerous threat at all. The guards refuse to listen, completely blinded by their deep hatred for humans, and accuse Arthur of being a violent savage. Just as the situation is about to turn deadly, a bright green energy orb suddenly appears, and an elderly gray-haired elf steps out to command the guards to release the human at once. The elderly man introduces himself as Virion Erilith, the former ruler of the Elenoir kingdom. He sternly tells the guards to stand down and then formally thanks Arthur for aiding his granddaughter. Arthur is completely shocked to hear this and realizes for the first time that Tessia is actually the princess of the elves. Before Arthur can even process this massive revelation, a fancy black and gold carriage arrives at the scene. Tessia's parents, King Alduin and Queen Mariel, rush out and joyfully embrace their missing daughter. The heartwarming reunion is quickly interrupted when King Alduin notices Arthur standing nearby. He instantly becomes furious at the sight of a human in his kingdom and loudly demands to know what the guards are doing, ordering them to arrest the boy immediately. Virion calmly steps in and explains that Arthur saved Tessia's life and brought her back safely, so he hardly deserves a summary execution. Queen Mariel tries to comfort Tessia, but the young princess stubbornly refuses to back down. She loudly declares that Arthur is a good person and demands that her family show him proper hospitality at their castle. King Alduin is visibly stressed and completely appalled by the idea of bringing a human into the royal palace, but Tessia gives him the ultimate puppy dog eyes and begs him to agree. Unable to say no to his precious daughter, Alduin reluctantly gives in to her demands. Tessia happily grabs Arthur's hand and promises to share all her favorite treats with him. As they walk away, Virion closely watches Arthur and silently notices that the boy possesses an unfathomable, mysterious strength. Tessia excitedly drags Arthur through the bustling elven city, showing off the beautiful white dome-shaped houses built into the massive mountain cliffs and the long wooden suspension bridges connecting the lush green forest platforms. Arthur is genuinely amazed to see such a unique and advanced civilization with his own eyes, especially since humans and elves have a long history of bitter conflicts. Despite the beautiful scenery, Arthur remains highly guarded and acutely aware of the hostile glares from the elf citizens around him. He knows he cannot afford to let his guard down again after realizing how easily the elves would kill him just for being human. They finally arrive at the Grand White Castle, where a large group of maids in blue dresses warmly welcomes Princess Tessia back home. Tessia immediately orders the staff to prepare their best hospitality for her savior, suggesting snacks, a meal, and a long bath. She then asks her parents if she can fully explain what happened to her while they enjoy some tea and pastries. The royal family gathers in a grand meeting room with stone walls and decorative curtains. Arthur politely kneels on the tiled floor to show respect, but Tessia insists he sit in a chair at the long wooden table with everyone else. King Alduin formally introduces himself and his wife, Queen Mariel, while Virion introduces himself as the former king. Arthur introduces himself as Arthur Lewin from a humble town in the Sapin Kingdom and humbly expresses his gratitude for the audience. Alduin coldly notes that Arthur is surprisingly well educated for a low-born human. Arthur proceeds to explain his harrowing journey, detailing how his family was ambushed by bandits and how he eventually stumbled upon Tessia in the forest. He deliberately leaves out a few specific details about his own powers but tells the complete truth about the slavers. Upon hearing the word slavers, King Alduin slams his fist on the table in a blind rage, shouting that human barbarians were responsible for kidnapping his daughter. Arthur politely but firmly corrects the king, stating that slave traffickers belong to a shared criminal profession, not a shared race. This bold statement completely shocks the royal family. Virion leans forward and skeptically asks how a mere child could possibly negotiate with or defeat grown slavers to save Tessia. Arthur plainly states that he did not negotiate or beg, but rather used his sorcery to overcome them. The royal guards standing in the room are deeply insulted by this claim and angrily draw their swords, accusing Arthur of lying and deceiving the princess to infiltrate their kingdom. Virion strictly orders the guards to lower their weapons, and Tessia aggressively defends Arthur's story. She confirms that bad men captured her, threw her in a wagon, and openly talked about selling her off for a high price. Hearing his daughter's testimony, King Alduin finally believes Arthur's story and thanks him for his bravery. Arthur then makes his one request, asking the king for help to safely return to his family in the Sapin Kingdom. Alduin's expression darkens immediately, and he harshly asks if Arthur seriously expects the elves to show gratitude and assist a human after all the historical enmity between their races. Arthur fearlessly looks the king in the eye and replies that if the elves truly believe humans are lowly savages, they shouldn't conduct themselves in the same debased, ungrateful manner. Virion chuckles at the clever response, admitting that Arthur makes a very fair point. Alduin sighs and explains the harsh reality of the situation. The teleportation gate to the Sapin Kingdom is highly restricted and only opens for a joint council between the rulers of the three races once every 7 years. Since the last council recently passed, the gate will not open again for another 5 years. Arthur is completely devastated by this news, realizing 5 years is far too long to be separated from his parents. However, Alduin states that they obviously cannot let a human live among them for that long either, so he promises to prepare a special military escort to safely guide Arthur back home by tomorrow morning. Arthur feels a massive wave of relief wash over him, thankful that he can finally go home. But right at that moment, an agonizing, unbearable pain fiercely strikes his chest. He desperately clutches his shirt, gritting his teeth to hide his intense suffering from the royal family. Alduin completely misses Arthur's distress and simply tells him to make himself comfortable for the night. Later that evening, Arthur sneaks out to a secluded waterfall to train and try to understand what is happening to his body. He stands shirtless under the rushing water, clutching his chest in pain and silently begging Sylvia for help. The pain eventually lessens in the cool night breeze, and Arthur steps out onto a massive stone balcony overlooking the dark cliffside. He looks up and spots Tessia happily spending time with her parents and Virion on a higher balcony. Seeing their warm family dynamic makes Arthur deeply miss his own parents, Reynolds and Alice. He wonders if they managed to safely escape the bandit ambush and if they are even still alive. His mind fills with dark doubts as he questions if his parents would ever smile at him like that again, feeling immensely guilty for being entirely incapable of protecting them during the attack. He feels overwhelmed by the dark, violent nature of his past life as a king, realizing that his soul is constantly waging a bitter war against his old self. Suddenly, Tessia runs down to the lower balcony and happily greets him. She apologizes for her father and grandfather being so rude during the meeting. Arthur brushes it off, telling her she should just act like the spoiled princess she is and enjoy the attention from her worried family. Tessia gets slightly annoyed and claims Arthur will act exactly the same way when he finally reunites with his own parents. Arthur's expression turns somber and he voices his deep insecurities, saying his parents went through so much trouble because of him and might not even miss a weak son who couldn't protect them. Tessia immediately hates his self-deprecating attitude. She boldly steps forward, grabs Arthur's face, and aggressively squishes his cheeks together. She forcefully tells him that his parents are obviously incredibly sad about losing him, and she is already terribly sad that he is leaving tomorrow. Arthur is completely startled by her sudden physical affection and genuine words. Dozens of glowing green orbs begin to float up from the dark rocky abyss around the balcony. Tessia happily explains that the beautiful floating lights are called firefly pots. Arthur looks at the glowing lights and feels a profound sense of clarity. He realizes he was being foolish by letting his past life's trauma dictate his current emotions. He sincerely apologizes to Tessia for his dark mood and admits that he likes the glowing fireflies too. The two children share a peaceful moment watching the lights together. Suddenly, Arthur's sharp combat instincts completely take over. He rapidly pushes Tessia behind him to shield her and flawlessly blocks a massive surge of green energy aimed right at them. The glowing green light clears to reveal Virion standing there with a large grin on his face. Tessia is absolutely furious and angrily yells at her grandfather for trying to kill them. Virion laughs it off, casually stating that his little trick wouldn't actually kill anyone. He explains that he staged the sudden ambush solely to test Arthur's instant defensive response, successfully proving that the boy really did have the skills to fight off a group of armed slavers. Tessia scolds Virion for picking on Arthur, insisting that he isn't the kind of human Virion should hate. Virion agrees, stating he hasn't taken this much interest in someone in a very long time. He summons a wooden training sword from a swirl of green magic and playfully challenges Arthur to a second round. Arthur grabs a wooden sword of his own, and the two immediately launch into a fierce, high-speed duel right there in the courtyard. Arthur lunges through the air with direct, precise movements, using his mana to boost his physical strength. However, Virion is incredibly fast, easily dodging and parrying every single strike Arthur throws at him. Arthur realizes he has to push his body even further to match the elderly elf's ridiculous speed. He grits his teeth and lands a powerful direct strike right on Virion's chest, but the impact completely shatters Arthur's wooden sword into tiny flying fragments. Unarmed but entirely unfazed, Arthur's survival instincts kick in. He remembers the wild, desperate beasts he fought in his past life and channels that same raw, primal energy. His arm violently erupts in a swirling mass of fiery red and green elemental magic. He charges forward and brutally punches Virion directly in the face, sending the former king stumbling backward across the stone floor. Tessia immediately jumps into the fray, grabbing Virion from behind and yelling at him to stop his relentless bullying. Virion rubs his bruised forehead and smirks, openly admitting he definitely didn't expect the young boy to actually get the better of him. He is incredibly impressed by Arthur's raw talent and combat awareness. Without any hesitation, Virion formally offers to take Arthur in as his personal apprentice. Arthur is completely taken aback by the sudden offer and politely declines, explaining that his parents still don't know he's alive and he absolutely needs to go home. Virion slyly counters by suggesting there might be a magical way to contact his parents and let them know he's safe without him having to leave Elenoir. Before Arthur can even ask how that is possible, the agonizing, unbearable pain strikes his chest again, but this time it is significantly worse. He collapses onto the hard stone floor, violently clutching his chest and sweating profusely as he struggles to breathe. Virion steps forward, looks down at the suffering boy, and his expression turns dead serious. He plainly states that he suspected this might be the case. Virion reveals that Arthur is currently experiencing the severe physical backlash of inheriting a powerful beast will. He strictly warns Arthur that he no longer has a choice in the matter. Arthur must become his apprentice and learn how to properly control his rampant mana, because if he refuses, the overwhelming power of the beast will is going to completely destroy his body and kill him. While unconscious from his catastrophic mana core failure, Arthur finds himself trapped in a dark void experiencing a terrible nightmare. He stares up at a massive, menacing entity made of swirling purple and blue mist with glowing red eyes and a sinister grin. Arthur tightly shuts his eyes in intense distress, heavily sweating as he feels the crushing anxiety and the massive weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. He slowly wakes up from the nightmare and finds Tessia sitting directly on top of him in his bed. She happily tells him to get up because Virion is waiting for them. Arthur sluggishly asks for 5 more minutes and jokingly calls her a monster. Tessia gets incredibly angry, aggressively yells at him for the insult, and pulls his arms to drag him out of bed. Arthur rubs his head and comments that she looked like Medusa just a second ago. Tessia asks him if he is truly planning on staying in Elenoir. Arthur takes off his shirt to change and explains that he will make his final decision after their upcoming trip. He calls her princess, which completely flusters her. She violently pulls his shirt over his head, loudly demands that he call her Tess instead of princess, and orders him to leave the room so she can get changed. Meanwhile, King Alduin argues with Virion in the grand hallway about keeping Arthur in the elven capital. Alduin strongly insists that allowing a human to stay completely goes against all of their sacred traditions. Virion completely ignores his son's complaints and simply states that he has taken a liking to the boy. Tessia jumps into the argument and loudly reminds her father that Arthur saved her life twice. Alduin aggressively tries to silence his daughter, but Virion shuts the entire argument down and tells everyone it is time to leave. Virion, Arthur, and Tessia ride together in a fancy carriage pulled by an armored beast. Tessia falls completely asleep and rests her head on Arthur's shoulder. Virion tells Arthur that Tessia woke up very early because she was extremely anxious to find out what would happen to him. Virion explains that Tessia usually lives a very isolated life as the sole heir to the throne. She has had her heart broken by superficial friends in the past, so she always keeps her emotional walls up and refuses to get close to anyone. Virion gently strokes his sleeping granddaughter's cheek and notes that she smiles incredibly naturally whenever she is with Arthur. Virion sincerely thanks Arthur for bringing that genuine happiness back into her life. Arthur listens intently to the former king and realizes Virion is a man he can truly trust. Tessia slowly wakes up, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and asks if they have arrived at their destination yet. The carriage stops at a stone house hidden deep within the lush green forest. Virion walks up to the wooden door and aggressively kicks it, shouting for his old friend Rhenia Darkassan to open up. Rhenia slides the door open and angrily yells at Virion for being a loud old bastard. Virion introduces her to Arthur as a sorcerer and a diviner with highly unique skills. Arthur politely introduces himself and realizes her magic must fall outside the normal 4 elements. Rhenia happily invites them inside her rustic home filled with large wooden bookshelves. Arthur directly asks her how she plans to help him contact his parents. Rhenia sits behind a wooden table with a large water basin and notes that Arthur is a very special child. She mentions she can see pieces of his past and future, though something about him remains totally hidden even from her sight. She correctly guesses that he simply wants to let his parents know he is safe. Arthur confirms this with a heavy heart. Rhenia uses her magic to make the water in the basin glow green and instructs Arthur to look closely into it while picturing his parents with as much detail as possible. Arthur closes his eyes and focuses hard on his mother Alice and his father Reynolds. He visualizes Alice's gentle nature and Reynolds' charismatic leadership. The water ripples and projects a clear vision of his parents inside their dining room. Alice serves Reynolds a pot of stew, but they both look incredibly depressed. Reynolds mentions it is Arthur's birthday, and Alice starts crying at the table. The vision then transitions to a flashback of the exact day Arthur disappeared. Alice screams and cries hysterically on a grassy cliff while the Twin Horns party members physically hold her back. Reynolds kneels on the ground in total despair. Adam Crench approaches Reynolds and furiously punches him in the face multiple times for letting Arthur fall off the cliff. Reynolds takes the brutal beating and completely blames himself for the tragedy. The party then travels somberly in a covered wagon back to a large human city. They arrive at a massive white building and settle into a room. Back in the present vision, Alice and Reynolds sit at their table grieving. Arthur finally speaks through the magic spell, calling out to them. Alice and Reynolds hear his voice and look up at the ceiling in total shock. A glowing green circular barrier appears right over their table, projecting Arthur's voice directly into their home. Arthur tells them he is alive and currently staying with the elves in the kingdom of El Noir. He explains that he is using a special spell to contact them temporarily. He apologizes for not coming home immediately, revealing that there is something wrong with his body that requires ongoing treatment. He promises it is nothing serious and swears he will return to them once he is fully healed. He begs them not to blame themselves for the bandit attack, stating he would have made the exact same choice to protect them even if it killed him. Alice bursts into tears of pure joy, and Reynolds holds her tightly in a protective embrace. Arthur tells them he loves them, and his parents express their immense relief before the magical connection ends. Back in Rhenia's house, Arthur completely breaks down and cries intensely at the table. He feels an overwhelming sense of relief knowing his parents are safe. He wipes his tears, looks at Virion with absolute determination, and directly asks the Elven Elder to formally take him on as an apprentice so he can get stronger. The group returns to the Elven capital, and Tessia aggressively confronts her parents again. She yells at King Alduin and Queen Mariel, demanding they show Arthur proper respect because chasing him away will make all elves look ungrateful. Alduin finally caves to the immense pressure. He officially agrees that Arthur will study under Virion's direct tutelage. Alduin walks up to Arthur in the Grand Hall and formally apologizes for his previous hostility, admitting his time on the throne has made him overly stubborn. Mariel also smiles and warmly tells Arthur to treat the palace as his own home. Arthur accepts their apology but secretly notes that Alduin is completely soft on his daughter and totally unable to stand up to Virion. Tessia immediately asks for permission to take Arthur out to play so she can show him around the city. Tessia and Arthur head out into the bustling elven marketplace. Tessia wears a large pink hat and excitedly pulls Arthur through the crowded stone streets. She spots a popular sweets vendor and enthusiastically points it out. As they walk, Arthur accidentally bumps into a blonde elven boy named Faerith Evsar II. Faerith heavily overreacts to the bump, looking at Arthur with absolute disgust and loudly complaining about getting human germs on his clothes. Faerith begins mocking Arthur, aggressively telling him that humans do not belong in El Noir. A large crowd of other elven children joins in, calling Arthur a monkey and telling him to go home. Arthur stays completely calm and tells Tessia they should just ignore the predictable past. Faerith gets even more arrogant and offers to escort Tessia instead of the lowly human. Arthur playfully pretends to be highly impressed by the noble Evsar name, completely laying on thick sarcasm. He bows deeply and mocks Faerith's supposed genius, stating he will show him proper respect from now on. Tessia giggles uncontrollably as they walk away. Faerith realizes he is being mocked and gets incredibly furious. He He yells at them, officially challenges Arthur to a duel to defend his family's pride, and pulls out a purple magic wand. Feyrith pressures Arthur by stating that running away will ruin Virion's reputation as a teacher. Arthur casually accepts the challenge, and Tessia steps up to officially referee the match. A large crowd of elves gathers around to watch the fight. Tessia signals the start of the duel, and Feyrith instantly attacks. He uses his wand to launch several explosive magical arrows right at Arthur. Arthur completely ignores the magical blasts, dashes forward with terrifying speed, and violently punches Feyrith right in the face. The heavy blow sends the arrogant noble flying through the air. Feyrith crashes onto the cobblestone path and starts crying in total defeat. Arthur looks down at him and casually wonders if he hit him too hard. Tessia runs over, grabs Arthur by the hand, and cheerfully drags him away from the scene to avoid any more trouble. They run through the forest village, laughing joyfully together. Arthur and Tessia spend the rest of the day hanging out. They buy tasty snacks from the vendors and eat them in the crowded market. They visit a large library and read books together at a long wooden table. Arthur also checks out a weapon shop, carefully examining various glowing crystals and swords while talking to the shopkeeper. Later in the evening, they lean against a white balcony railing overlooking the entire elven city and its massive suspension bridges. Tessia asks Arthur if he is looking forward to his training starting the next day. Arthur smiles and confirms he is. He thinks back to a serious conversation he had with Virion in the dark forest. Virion warned him that the beast tamer training would be incredibly brutal, comparing the physical toll to being dipped in boiling pitch. Virion reminded Arthur that choosing to stay in a foreign land without his family meant he had to endure immense pain and maintain absolute diligence. Despite the terrifying warning, Arthur enthusiastically accepted the challenge, stating he was truly looking forward to the harsh regimen. Back on the balcony, Arthur tells Tessia that he is excited because he is finally choosing his own future after everything he has been through. Tessia gets completely fired up by his strong determination. She enthusiastically pumps her fists and loudly vows to work just as hard as he does. The very next day, Arthur meets Virion in a lush green forest clearing to begin his official tutelage. Arthur stands ready in his black training clothes, and Virion declares the start of their routine. Over the course of 3 full years, Arthur endures an incredibly grueling physical and magical regimen. He travels deep into a massive forest canyon filled with glowing blue gems and ancient ruins. He suffers through intense, agonizing pain in his chest as he actively forces his unstable mana core to settle. He discovers mysterious glowing orbs of mana and learns to properly harness their energy. He practices tirelessly with Tessia in a stone courtyard, greatly improving his combat forms. He engages in countless intense sparring matches with Virion, lunging and dodging at blinding speeds with wooden practice swords. Arthur rapidly grows taller and significantly stronger over the years. He stands proudly before a glowing waterfall in the dark forest, fully realizing that his difficult path will only get harder, but he remains completely ready to face his exciting future. Arthur and Tessia stand on a balcony and watch a golden carriage leave the courtyard below. Arthur asks where the carriage is heading, and Tessia explains that her parents, King Alduin and Queen Muriel, are traveling to a special meeting that requires their mandatory attendance. Later, they head inside, and Tessia presents Arthur with a massive hamburger she made entirely by herself. She aggressively demands that he eat the whole thing and tells him he should be grateful that such a beautiful girl cooked for him. Arthur takes a huge bite and quickly devours the food, playfully teasing her by questioning if the cook was actually beautiful. Tessia gets incredibly flustered and embarrassed by his joke. Shortly after breakfast, the two of them head out into a dense forest clearing to continue their ongoing training with Virion. Arthur and Tessia warm up by sparring with each other, lunging and throwing kicks at high speeds. Virion stands nearby holding 2 wooden swords and watches them fight. He casually tells them that they are both moving way too slow for his liking. Tessia completely ignores her grandfather's criticism and energetically vows to clobber Arthur. Virion decides they have warmed up enough, so he tosses the wooden practice swords to them and announces that they are ready to begin the next phase of their training. They sit down on the grass, and Virion starts with a comprehensive review of basic sorcery. He explains that once a person stabilizes their mana, they can master one of the 4 main elements, which are fire, water, wind, and earth. He notes that elemental inclination heavily depends on a person's race. Elves naturally specialize in wind, water, and earth, while dwarves are strongly attuned to earth and fire. Humans are totally unique because they possess the capacity to learn all 4 elements. Arthur is surprised by this and asks if humans can really use everything. Virion clarifies that while humans have the potential for all 4, Individual compatibility means most people are only ever capable of using one specific element. He adds that only a few exceptionally rare individuals can use multiple elements. Arthur raises his hand and asks a highly important question. He wants to know why he hasn't been allowed to use any sorcery during his physical training, especially since Tessia uses it all the time. Virion gets very serious and finally reveals the truth. He explains that an incredibly powerful beast will is currently slumbering deep inside Arthur's mana core. This wild beast will completely upsets the natural balance between Arthur's physical body and his magical core, which is the exact reason Arthur suffers from such intense chest pain. Virion states that they first needed Arthur's mana to properly assimilate with his body. Now that his body is ready, Virion plans to forcefully awaken the beast will. He assures Tessia that the procedure is completely safe, promising that Arthur will only feel a little bit of heat and will emerge as a true beast tamer. Arthur enthusiastically agrees to the process. He kneels on the sandy forest floor, and Virion steps up to ignite the mana core. Virion violently punches Arthur directly in the stomach and presses his glowing hand against Arthur's chest. A blinding burst of golden magical energy erupts from Arthur's body, completely engulfing the entire forest. Arthur screams in pure agony as the intense magic shreds his shirt and blasts sharp wooden stakes across the clearing. Within the blinding light, the massive silhouette of a horned dragon briefly materializes. The shockwave forces Tessia and Virion to step back, and Virion is utterly stunned by the sheer magnitude of the explosion. Sometime later, Arthur wakes up shirtless in a bed with Virion sitting closely beside him. Virion immediately asks if Arthur knows the origin of his beast will. Arthur confirms that the will came from a dragon named Sylvia. Virion is completely shocked by this revelation but admits it matches the massive silhouette he saw during the explosion. He strictly warns Arthur to never tell anyone about this, explaining that possessing a dragon's will is guaranteed to attract highly dangerous enemies. Putting the beast will aside, Virion drops some massive news. He informs Arthur that his departure from El Noir is now officially set for just 4 months from now, instead of the original 2 years. He explains that the 3 main kingdoms are hosting a massive cultural exchange event for young people, and the flying city of Xyrus will temporarily open its entrance to the public. Arthur realizes this is exactly why the king and queen left in the carriage earlier that morning. Arthur is completely shocked that he only has 4 months left, but he is also relieved that he will finally get to see his family again. Virion warns him that his training will become significantly harder starting tomorrow and mentions that Tessia already knows about his early departure. That night, Arthur lies alone in his dark room, feeling anxious about the shortened timeline. Suddenly, the glowing, multicolored stone that Sylvia gave him begins to crack. Arthur realizes in sheer terror that the stone is actually an egg. The egg completely shatters, sending glowing shards and shimmering particles flying across the room. A small black winged creature with tiny horns and a star-tipped tail emerges from the glowing debris. The newborn creature smiles joyfully at Arthur. Arthur picks the small dragon up, finding her incredibly adorable. Suddenly, the creature playfully bites his hand, and a glowing purple magical crest permanently imprints itself onto Arthur's arm. Arthur hears a voice in his head and quickly realizes he can communicate telepathically with the little dragon. He officially names her Sylvie in honor of her mother. Sylvie happily accepts her new name and falls completely asleep on the bed next to him. The next morning, Tessia peeks into Arthur's room and is totally amazed to find him sleeping beside the small black creature. She carefully picks Sylvie up, instantly falling in love with her cute fangs and tiny wings. Later that day, Arthur walks out into the forest with Sylvie perched comfortably on his head. He shows his new pet to Virion. Virion takes one look at the creature, realizes it is a real dragon, and nearly suffers a heart attack from the pure shock. He aggressively yells at Arthur for scaring him, clutching his chest in a total panic. Tessia crouches down and excitedly pets Sylvie while Virion catches his breath. Virion decides that it is far too dangerous for people to know the truth, so he instructs Arthur to simply tell everyone that Sylvie is a rare mana beast. With the secret settled, Virion announces it is time to begin the actual beast tamer training. He tells Arthur that he must now exercise his beast core and his mana core simultaneously, and the only effective way to do that is through brutal combat. Without any warning, Virion activates his own beast will, turning into a terrifying, massive, shadowy figure with glowing yellow eyes. He completely vanishes into thin air and ambushes Arthur from the dark smoke. Arthur is absolutely terrified and easily overpowered by the shadowy monster. He quickly surrenders, admitting that Virion's terrifying appearance is going to deeply traumatize him. Virion transforms back into his normal elf form and laughs. He explains that his Shadow Panther beast will grant him instinctive control over wind and completely neutralizes sound, making him an invisible assassin. He hands Arthur a wooden sword and officially begins the grueling sparring sessions. Over the next few weeks, Arthur pushes his body to the absolute limit. He fully masters his dragon beast will, and the intense pain in his chest completely disappears. His body becomes incredibly strong, allowing him to easily withstand the previously unbearable training. He eventually manages to hold his own against Virion's shadow form, fiercely striking back with powerful, glowing red sword attacks. During their free time, Arthur and Tessia act like normal children and play a tabletop board game in her room. Tessia heavily loses the game and bursts into tears out of pure frustration. Later, they head out into the bustling city to enjoy a vibrant outdoor festival decorated with colorful banners. While walking through the crowded stone streets, they accidentally bump into the arrogant blonde elf, Faerith. Faerith immediately gets angry and formally challenges Arthur to another duel, still deeply bitter about his humiliating defeat from years ago. He yells at Arthur for using unsporting tactics. Instead of fighting, Arthur simply grabs Faerith's hand, shakes it firmly, and warmly calls him Fei Fei. The casual nickname completely embarrasses the noble elf in front of the entire crowd. Faerith tries to recover his dignity and proudly brags that he was chosen as a mandatory goodwill ambassador to attend the upcoming cultural exchange in Xyrus City. Hearing this, Tessia gets incredibly depressed because, as the princess, she is strictly forbidden from attending the exchange. Faerith playfully teases her, asking if they are worried their delicate princess will get lost again. Tessia completely loses her temper at being called delicate. She violently punches Faerith in the face, sending him and her pink hat flying high into the blue sky. Faerith crashes back down to the stone path, completely dazed and sporting a massive red mark on his head. The crowd rushes over to check on the unconscious noble. Arthur quickly pulls Tessia away from the scene and sharply scolds her for slugging one of her own subjects. Tessia gets completely defensive and cries out that it isn't fair. She yells that Arthur gets to go home to his family while she is stuck in the Elven Kingdom and cannot even join her peers at the cultural exchange. She aggressively accuses Arthur of sounding exactly like her strict father, angrily calls him an old man, and runs away in tears. Later that night, Tessia sits hunched on her bed in the dark, crying alone in her room. Arthur suddenly appears directly outside her open window, using his magic to gather a large swarm of glowing green fireflies to cheer her up. He gently invites her to sneak out into the woods with him just like they used to do when they were younger. Tessia agrees, and they walk deep into the dark forest, surrounded by massive gnarled trees. They set up a small campfire in an open grassy field under a vast, starry night sky. A terrifying tree monster with glowing pink eyes suddenly appears from the shadows to attack them, but they easily defeat it and sit back down by the fire. Arthur playfully asks if Tessia is still scared of ghosts, but she completely denies it, claiming she is just cold. She then asks Arthur what the human kingdom is actually like. Arthur looks back at her and admits he isn't entirely sure because he never got the chance to explore it before he fell off the cliff. Tessia shyly suggests that he could just stay in Elenoir with her forever instead of leaving. Arthur feels completely conflicted by her request and stays silent as Tessia slowly falls asleep, leaning toward him. The 4 months quickly pass, and the day of Arthur's departure finally arrives. Arthur packs his large backpack and heads into the city, where a massive crowd of elves has gathered in the circular plaza to see him off. Virion walks up to Arthur and hands him a special golden pocket watch engraved with the Aerolith family seal. He explains that it functions as a magical compass to ensure Arthur never gets lost, and will grant him safe passage whenever he decides to return to the Elven Kingdom. Arthur sincerely thanks his grandfather figure, but looks around the crowded plaza with a sad expression, wondering where Tessia is. The large group, including Faerith and Virion, walks through a vast, cavernous tunnel toward the massive stone teleportation gate. Just as they arrive at the gateway flanked by giant statues, Tessia finally runs through the crowd shouting Arthur's name. She stops in front of him, bows deeply, and tries to act tough. She strictly orders him to eat properly and forbids him from wandering around and getting lost again. Arthur smiles warmly, grabs her hand, and pulls her into a tight, emotional hug. Tessia instantly breaks down crying, burying her face in his shoulder. Arthur gently strokes her hair and tells her how much he is going to miss her. Tessia hugs him back tightly and promises she will miss him too. With their final goodbyes completely settled, Arthur turns around with Sylvie perched happily on top of his head. He steps confidently toward the massive gateway as it opens with a blinding white and green light, fully ready to travel to the flying city of Xyrus and finally reunite with his long-lost family. Arthur steps out of the teleportation gate and finally arrives at the grand estate where his family is currently staying, instantly spotting his parents, Reynolds and Alice, in the main hall. They stare at him in complete disbelief, utterly shocked to see the son they thought had died years ago standing right in front of them. Reynolds is so stunned he can barely form a sentence, initially thinking Arthur might be the new baby Alice is expecting, but Alice quickly realizes it is truly her boy and bursts into tears of pure joy. She rushes forward and pulls Arthur into a massive, desperate hug, crying out that she missed him so much and is incredibly relieved he is alive. Standing nearby is a little girl with brown pigtails and a pink dress who looks completely confused by the emotional adults. Reynolds gently tells Alice to calm down so she doesn't scare the little girl, and he explains to the child that Arthur is the big brother they always talked about before bedtime. Arthur kneels down to formally introduce himself to his little sister Eleanor, and she is surprised but quickly warms up to him, especially when she notices the small black creature perched on his shoulder. They all move into the living room to catch up properly, and Alice immediately starts fussing over Arthur, asking if he has been eating enough and if he is fully cured from the sickness he mentioned in his earlier letters. Arthur reassures his mother that he is perfectly fine and explains that his temporary illness was just a result of his manicore awakening too early and being highly unstable. He intentionally leaves out all the dangerous details about meeting the ancient dragon Sylvia and inheriting her powerful beast Will, knowing that telling his parents the complete truth would just put them in unnecessary danger and cause them to worry. Instead, he simply credits his miraculous survival from the cliff fall to a combination of pure luck and some subconscious magic use before explaining that he was rescued and healed by the elves in the kingdom of Elenoir. Eleanor is completely fascinated by Arthur's pet and happily plays with the little dragon on the couch, watching as it jumps around. Arthur introduces the creature as Sylvie, claiming she is a rare mana beast he found dying in a nest during his travels and decided to take in. Reynolds and Alice accept the story easily, just grateful to have their son back safe and sound under their roof. Reynolds then playfully shifts the topic to Arthur's magical progression and proudly announces that he has been working as a security instructor for the Helstia auction house. He brags that his own manicore has recently reached the deep orange stage, which is a massive achievement for an augmenter like him. He explains the progression of monicores, stating that the colors ascend from black to red, then orange, yellow, silver, and finally white, with each color having a deep, standard, and light phase. Reynolds fully expects his son to be highly impressed by his deep orange core, but Arthur casually reveals that his own manicore is already at the light red stage. Reynolds is absolutely crushed and shocked to hear that his 8-year-old son has already surpassed him in magical power. He gets so frustrated by the revelation that he accidentally curses loudly, which immediately earns him a harsh scolding from Alice for using bad language in front of Eleanor. Refusing to be outdone by a child, Reynolds decides he needs to see Arthur's actual combat strength for himself and eagerly challenges his son to a sparring match in the backyard. Before they can head outside, they are interrupted by the arrival of the estate's owners. Reynolds quickly introduces Arthur to his boss, Vincent Helstia, along with Vincent's wife Tabitha and their young daughter Lilia. Vincent is a wealthy auction house owner who generously took Reynolds and his family in after the disaster years ago. Lilia is a polite girl wearing a blue apron who instantly takes a liking to Sylvie and asks Arthur for permission to pet her. Vincent overhears the sparring challenge and becomes incredibly nervous, completely shocked that a grown man is about to fight an 8-year-old boy in a physical duel. He becomes even more bewildered when Alice casually confirms that Arthur is a magical prodigy who awakened his core at the age of 3 and has already reached the light red stage, a feat that even teenage geniuses at the best academies struggle to achieve. Everyone heads out to the massive grassy lawn behind the mansion to watch the fight unfold under the bright blue sky. Reynolds warns Arthur that he is not going to hold back and immediately lunges forward with incredible speed, throwing a flurry of rapid punches and kicks. Arthur easily dodges and blocks every single strike his father throws at him, moving with perfect precision. Reynolds is genuinely impressed by his son's reflexes and decides to take things to the next level by stepping back and engulfing his entire arm in intense yellow and orange fire magic. In this world, sorcerers are divided into 2 categories, conjurers and augmenters. Conjurers easily find their compatible elements among water, wind, fire, and earth, and they cast spells from a distance with relative ease. Augmenters, however, severely struggle to discover their elemental compatibility, but can use their mana to drastically enhance their physical bodies for close-range combat. Arthur realizes that his knowledge of Ki from his past life functions exactly like augmenter mana, giving him a massive advantage because Ki allows for full autonomy and control over one's internal energy. Arthur decides it is time to stop holding back and unleashes a massive burst of yellow and green magical aura that completely surrounds his body. The sheer force of his energy blows the onlookers away as Arthur charges at his father and delivers a devastating, glowing punch. The impact creates a massive explosion of golden light and fire on the lawn, sending Reynolds sliding violently backward across the grass. Arthur firmly plants his feet to stop his own momentum and reflects on how his rigorous physical training with his grandfather figure, Virion, helped him perfectly refine his fire magic. He remembers Virion pushing him to go beyond just fire and learning advanced elemental magic, triggering a memory of himself standing in a forest completely surrounded by terrifying arcs of golden electrical energy. Back in the present, Arthur decides to show off even more of his power. He turns toward a nearby stone fountain and uses water elemental magic to instantly freeze the flowing water, creating a massive, towering pillar of jagged blue ice that shoots into the sky. Reynolds and the rest of the Helsta family are absolutely speechless as they watch the ice pillar form. Being a dual elementalist capable of using two different magical elements is incredibly rare, and seeing an 8-year-old flawlessly execute advanced fire and water magic back-to-back is entirely unheard of. Vincent is so blown away by Arthur's unbelievable display of power that he quickly pulls both families inside the mansion for a highly serious discussion. They sit down at a long wooden dining table in a grand hall, and Vincent excitedly suggests that Arthur absolutely needs to be enrolled at the prestigious Iris Academy. He notes that it is the most elite magic academy on the entire continent, and he knows the director of the school personally through his auction house connections. Vincent generously offers to completely cover Arthur's expensive tuition, viewing it as a highly valuable investment in the boy's limitless future. Alice is hesitant to accept such a massive financial favor, noting that Arthur is still only 8 years old and the school might not even accept someone so young. Before Vincent can argue his case further, Arthur politely interrupts the adults. He explains that he is just too physically tired from the intense sparring match and his long journey to think about enrolling in school right now. He excuses himself from the table, leaving the adults to discuss his future, and wanders off into the massive mansion. Quickly gets lost in the grand marble hallways and runs into Lilia, who kindly offers to show him a secret spot to relax. She leads him down to the estate's basement kitchen, where she completely gorges herself on a massive plate of sliced meat and fatty duck. An elderly maid named Maria and a mustached butler playfully tease Lilia about her eating habits, mentioning that her mother is highly worried about her gaining extra weight. Lilia ignores them and blissfully continues eating, claiming she is a growing girl who needs food. The maid privately explains to Arthur that Lilia constantly stress eats because her parents put a massive amount of pressure on her to awaken as a sorcerer. Even though neither Vincent nor Tabitha possess any magical abilities themselves, they desperately want their daughter to become a mage, and the weight of that expectation is crushing her. Arthur feels genuinely bad for Lilia and realizes that the expectations placed on children in this world can be incredibly heavy and unfair. Later that night, Arthur finally heads up to his new bedroom to get some much-needed sleep. Reynolds and Alice come into his room to tuck him in, sitting on the edge of his bed. They reassure him that no matter how physically strong or magically powerful he gets, he will always be their kind, smart little boy on the inside. Arthur is deeply touched by their comforting words and wishes them a good night as they leave the room. The next morning, Arthur wakes up feeling refreshed and walks down the grand white staircase of the mansion, only to be completely surprised by a group of familiar faces waiting for him in the lower hall. It is the Twin Horns, the exact adventuring party that was escorting his family when they were ambushed by bandits years ago. The blonde conjurer Angela Rose immediately grabs Arthur and suffocates him in a massive, bone-crushing hug, crying hysterically about how incredibly happy she is to see him alive. The giant magic caster Durden warmly notes how much Arthur has grown since he was a toddler, while the red-haired, spear-wielding Adam cracks jokes about bringing back weird souvenirs from their recent travels across the continent. Helen, the elven archer, keeps her cool but is clearly relieved to see that the boy survived the fall. The most emotional reunion comes from the quiet rogue, Jasmine. She immediately drops to her knees, wraps her arms tightly around Arthur, and cries as she sincerely apologizes for failing to protect him on that cliff all those years ago. Arthur gently comforts her, assuring her that it was completely out of her control and that he is just genuinely happy they are all safely back together. The group eventually moves into the main living room to share lengthy stories of their recent travels, exploring new cities and taking on dangerous jobs to make a living. Adam proudly pulls out a highly questionable and gross monster part he bought as a souvenir, causing the rest of the group to aggressively yell at him to put the disgusting item away. As the adults loudly laugh and bicker over their wild adventures on the road, the scene shifts to another quiet room in the mansion where Lilia is sitting completely alone at a small wooden table. She fiercely clenches her fists on her lap and looks incredibly sad and deeply stressed, clearly still completely overwhelmed by the heavy, lingering expectations her parents have placed on her to magically awaken and become a powerful sorcerer just like Arthur. Arthur lies on the wooden floor of his bedroom, panting heavily with his eyes squeezed shut as he tries to maintain his magical energy. He can only hold the immense power for a few seconds before the strain becomes too much, leaving him completely exhausted and covered in sweat. He briefly wonders if pushing himself this hard is reckless and if he should pursue a different training method, but he quickly dismisses the thought. He resolves that he must master this overwhelming power so he can properly defend the people he loves, reminding himself that protecting his family is the entire reason he returned from the Elven Kingdom in the first place. His small black dragon companion, Sylvie, sits on the floor near his head and stares down at him. Arthur looks up at the creature and smiles tenderly, pulling the small dragon into a close embrace while expressing how happy he is to finally be back home. However, Sylvie quickly ruins the emotional moment by bluntly telling Arthur that he reeks. Prompted by his pet's harsh observation, Arthur takes Sylvie into the mansion's fancy brick-walled bathroom to wash her. He scrubs the squirming creature in a white clawfoot bathtub overflowing with pink bubbles, warning her not to stink up the incredibly wealthy estate. While washing the dragon, Arthur reflects on the sheer luxury of the Helstia mansion, noting that the family has clearly reaped massive benefits from running their highly successful auction house. Despite the comfortable surroundings, Arthur's mind drifts back to Lilia and the intense pressure her parents continuously place on her to awaken her sorcery. He recalls seeing her sit silently at the dinner table, looking utterly stressed while her parents casually discussed her magical potential as if it were a guaranteed outcome. Arthur simply cannot shake the deep concern for the girl from his head, but he finishes wiping down Sylvie with a towel and decides it is time for him to get cleaned up as well. Later that day, Alice decides Arthur needs a proper makeover before he can visit the prestigious Helstia auction house, so she takes him to a flamboyant local tailor. The energetic man with long brown hair and a heart-patterned headband treats Arthur like a rare, unpolished gem, confidently posing with his scissors and promising to make the boy shine like a star. After the styling session, Arthur steps out into the bustling, sunlit town square of Xyrus City wearing his neat new clothes. Alice, Tabitha, Eleanor, and Lilia are all waiting for him near the stone arches. The women compliment his perfect look, while little Eleanor excitedly asks her big brother to escort her around the city. Arthur happily agrees, holding his little sister's hand as they explore the cobblestone streets lined with busy market stalls hanging red banners and grand stone buildings. Tabitha explains that royalty often visits their auction house in disguise, which is exactly why Arthur needed to look presentable for the upcoming event. Along the way, they spot 4 boys walking through a courtyard wearing white-collared shirts with distinctive crests. Arthur immediately senses trouble from the group, but Tabitha quickly clarifies that those are students from the elite Xyrus Magic Academy, and wearing that specific uniform practically makes them royalty within the city. As the group continues their extensive shopping trip, they stop outside a store displaying vibrant beast cores mounted on yellow pedestals inside glass cases. Tabitha explains to Arthur that these magic cores are harvested directly from mana beasts and can massively amplify a person's magical power. She mentions that a core containing a beast can easily fetch up to 100 gold coins, a massive sum that Arthur notes would have lasted him over 2 centuries in his past life. Tabitha generously offers to arrange for Arthur to check out some beast cores at the next auction, but Arthur politely declines the offer, stating he is already completely satisfied with the powerful beast he currently possesses. However, Lilia eagerly begs her mother to buy one of the cheaper beast cores from a nearby weapon store so she can try to awaken her latent magic. Tabitha sternly shuts the idea down immediately, insisting that a beast core is not a magical shortcut to awakening sorcery and flatly refusing to waste so much money on something so incredibly expensive for a child. Defeated and visibly upset, Lilia silently follows the group to an outdoor cafe. As they sit around a round wooden table enjoying tiered pastries and hot tea, Arthur notices Lilia's deeply somber reflection in his teacup. He realizes that while Tabitha is strict about not buying magical shortcuts, the true source of Lilia's overwhelming stress might actually be the crushing weight of her father's massive expectations. While Arthur is lost in his own thoughts, Lilia quietly slips away from the cafe table without anyone noticing her departure. Arthur quickly spots her absence and tracks her down a narrow cobblestone alleyway leading straight to a local armory. Inside the dimly lit shop filled with heavy armor and wooden weapon racks, Arthur finds Lilia staring intently at a red beast core displayed on a purple cushion. She stubbornly claims she can afford the item with her own allowance and fully plans to buy it. Arthur quickly grabs her wrist, warning her that owning a beast core guarantees absolutely nothing and asking what she plans to do if she fails yet again. Lilia tearfully lashes out at him, completely frustrated by her constant magical failures. She accuses Arthur of not understanding her painful struggle because he is already naturally gifted and special. Overwhelmed by her own intense emotions, Lilia leans her head against Arthur's chest and cries bitterly, apologizing for her sudden outburst. She confesses that her parents absolutely refuse to let her even touch a beast core, no matter how much she begs them. Arthur feels terrible, realizing his own sudden return and immense magical power have only worsened the daily pressure on Lilia. Before Arthur can properly comfort the crying girl, they are rudely interrupted by the 3 Xyrus Magic Academy students they saw walking earlier. The boys arrogantly mock Lilia's tearful apology and intentionally try to start trouble. Arthur steps directly in front of Lilia to protect her, glaring fiercely at the uniformed students. The shop owner shouts from behind the wooden counter, warning Arthur not to cause a scene with Academy students because he desperately fears losing his business over a fight. One of the blue-haired students laughs and tells Arthur not to bother running away, while another boy generates a bright ball of fire in his hand to intimidate them. Arthur decides he has had enough of their bullying and demands the boys release their magic immediately. He summons his own intense flame to show he is more than ready to fight them all. The shop owner completely panics, but not because of the students' magic. He recognizes Lilia and urgently warns the arrogant boys that they are actively messing with the daughter of the Helsta family, the exact wealthy family that heavily funds their academy. Realizing they are about to attack a major donor's daughter, the 3 bullies instantly lose their confidence. Sweating and cursing their terrible luck, they quickly back down and flee the armory, terrified that the school director will find out about their reckless behavior and expel them. The angry boy who initially started the fight throws one last desperate insult, accusing Lilia of trying to buy her way into the academy because she is too utterly useless to earn a spot on her own, before storming out the door. Later that evening, the group returns to the Helstia mansion. Vincent stands in the grand hallway, incredibly stressed and nervously clenching his fists after hearing about the physical confrontation with the academy students. He quickly reassures Arthur that the Helsta family's sizable financial donations will easily prevent the incident from ruining Arthur's chances of enrolling at the school. Arthur nervously replies that he has not even decided if he wants to attend the academy yet. Vincent dismisses the concern, insisting they have plenty of influence to handle any issues. However, Lilia takes Vincent's reassuring words the entirely wrong way. She looks completely devastated and directly asks her father if he is planning to send Arthur to the academy in her place simply because she still cannot use magic. Vincent tries to deny it, but Lilia is completely heartbroken. She angrily shouts that she hates her father and hates Arthur before turning around and sprinting away in tears. At dinner time, Arthur stands outside the massive dining room doors, hesitant to go inside. He overhears Vincent in the next room, sadly reflecting on how he used to promise a young Lilia that she would attend the academy and become a great sorcerer. Vincent is deeply upset that his recent careless comments made his own daughter feel completely replaced. Arthur eventually finds Lilia hiding in the stone-walled basement kitchen. She immediately apologizes for lashing out at him earlier, admitting she felt intensely jealous when Arthur showed up with his amazing powers and seemingly stole all her father's attention. She tearfully confesses that she feels like a massive disappointment for continually failing to awaken her magic and naturally assumes her parents are entirely sick of her. Arthur gently steps forward and cups her tear-filled face in his hands. He tells her he fully understands the dark, sinking feeling of constant self-reproach. Wanting to genuinely cheer her up, Arthur shares a personal story about a young elven girl who once comforted him in the exact same way when he was completely lost and separated from his family in a misty forest. As he speaks, Arthur uses his magic to summon several glowing green orbs of light in the dim room. Lilia watches in pure amazement as the beautiful lights float freely around them. Arthur explains that these magical lights closely resemble that young girl's favorite flowers. He assures Lilia that her parents clearly see how hard she is constantly trying and love her deeply regardless of her magical ability. He specifically explains that Vincent is only fawning over him because he is a brand new novelty, comparing the situation to how his own little sister Eleanor treats him. Lilia finally laughs at the comparison, covering her mouth, and admits that her father only desperately wants her to be a sorcerer so she can secure a happy future. She realizes she placed most of the crushing internal pressure directly on herself. Arthur notes that, while Lilia might feel that way, Vincent's constant push for her academy enrollment forces highly unrealistic expectations on her from everyone around them. He asks Lilia if she truly wants to use magic for herself or just to blindly please her parents. Deciding to fix the core issue immediately, Arthur orchestrates a drastic and risky plan. He returns to the main living room where Vincent, Tabitha, Reynolds, and Alice are all gathered together. Arthur solemnly sits on the yellow sofa and drops a massive bombshell, boldly announcing that Lilia has permanently left the house. He hands Vincent a folded letter, claiming he actively sent Lilia to the highly dangerous place he previously trained so she could finally awaken her magic through sheer survival. Vincent aggressively reads the note, which clearly states Lilia feels like a completely useless burden and promises to return only after successfully becoming an amazing sorcerer. Vincent instantly drops to his knees on the patterned floor, completely devastated and crying in pure shock. He realizes exactly how foolish he has been all these years, openly admitting he completely ruined his daughter's life by continually forcing his own beliefs about magic and happiness onto her. Tabitha kneels right beside him, also bursting into tears as Vincent loudly declares to the room that Lilia absolutely does not need to be a sorcerer for him to love her. With Vincent's true feelings fully exposed, Arthur calls out to the hallway. Lilia slowly steps out from behind the wooden door, revealing she never actually left the estate. Arthur quickly steps in front of her and deeply bows to his own parents, apologizing for testing Vincent and Tabitha with the horrific pain of losing a child, especially since he put his own parents through an incredibly similar nightmare years ago. Reynolds and Alice are entirely shocked by the extreme stunt but quickly accept his apology, understanding his good underlying intentions to fix the broken family dynamic. Vincent and Tabitha urgently rush forward, embracing Lilia tightly as they all cry together. Vincent tearfully apologizes directly to his daughter, officially promising she never has to attend the academy or ever learn magic again. However, Lilia firmly states she still actively wants to go to the school. She proudly declares her ultimate dream is to learn magic so she can eventually make other people happy, just like Arthur does. Seeing her genuine resolve, Arthur decides to intervene directly and properly help Lilia awaken her latent mana. He gathers everyone in a quiet room and has Lilia and little Eleanor kneel together on a floral rug. Arthur stands right behind them and instructs them both to focus entirely on their breathing. He clearly explains that taking deep, highly controlled breaths and steadily meditating will significantly help them sense the ambient mana naturally flowing around them. He tells the girls to close their eyes and steadily keep breathing until they can literally see a light forming in the surrounding darkness. Lilia struggles at first, instantly losing the mental image whenever her breathing breaks, but Arthur patiently encourages her to simply keep trying. He warns them they might physically feel a slight heat but must actively maintain their deep focus. Suddenly, multiple glowing green orbs of pure mana materialize directly in the dark space around them. Vincent, Tabitha, Reynolds, Alice, and the household maids watch in absolute awe as the gentle green light illuminates the entire room. Lilia opens her eyes, genuinely marveling at the beautiful physical manifestation of her own newly awakened magic, quickly noting it looks exactly like the glowing flowers Arthur showed her in the kitchen earlier. To properly celebrate Lilia's massive magical breakthrough, the entire household gathers in a stone-walled room for a huge celebratory feast. They cheerfully laugh and clink their wooden mugs together, loudly congratulating Lilia on finally taking her highly anticipated first steps toward becoming a true sorcerer. They bring out massive plates of fatty duck and freshly sliced meat, telling Lilia to eat absolutely as much as she wants. Arthur casually sits beside her at the wooden table, warning her that it will probably take a few years of relentless daily practice before her newly formed magical core fully stabilizes. Lilia confidently accepts the challenge, eagerly wondering aloud what specific elemental affinities she will eventually develop once she starts training properly. The two of them share a warm laugh, completely relieved that the heavy emotional tension in the house is finally gone. As the joyful family celebration continues loudly around him, Arthur relaxes and lets his thoughts casually drift toward the highly anticipated upcoming event at the Helsty auction house. Highly curious to see what incredibly rare and amusing items might be put up for sale, the group finally arrives at the Helsty auction house. The massive stone building glows brightly under the night sky, and Eleanor excitedly points out that it looks exactly like a grand castle. Alice calmly reassures a nervous Tabitha that they will fit right in with the upper-class crowd, and Tabitha happily leads everyone inside so they can enjoy the festivities. The interior of the grand hall is absolutely packed with aristocrats and wealthy adventurers browsing through various glass display cases containing vibrant beast cores and ornate statues. Vincent and Reynolds are busy coordinating the entire security team for the night. Reynolds looks completely serious in his guard uniform, and Eleanor proudly notes how cool her dad looks while he works. Alice smiles and tells Eleanor to make sure she compliments him later. Vincent soon steps onto the main stage and officially begins the 10th anniversary auction by enthusiastically introducing the guests of honor. King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla, Prince Curtis, and Princess Kathleen wave to the cheering crowd from an elevated royal balcony. Arthur watches the king closely from the floor and remembers his own past life as a ruler, feeling a strong sense of nostalgia while observing the monarch's popularity. The very first item put up for bid is a specialized silver dagger displayed in a glass case. The auctioneer explains that channeling mana into the blade electrifies the tip, giving it a razor-sharp edge that can instantly paralyze enemies upon contact. The bidding starts at 50 gold pieces. Arthur carefully observes the weapon and makes a mental note about the technique of applying elemental enchantments to weapons so he can try it himself later on. As the auction continues with other items like hollow stone masks, Arthur suddenly realizes Sylvie is no longer sitting with them. He checks with Alice, who mentions that Eleanor was carrying her just a minute ago, but both Eleanor and Lilia are now fast asleep on the wooden bench. Arthur decides to quietly slip away and look for his wandering pet. Meanwhile, the auctioneer presents a captured world lion cub trapped inside a metal cage. He explains that the yellow beast could easily reach A-class power once fully grown. Prince Curtis immediately asks his father to buy the cub for him. King Blaine agrees and completely shuts down the impending bidding war by casually offering a massive sum of 1,000 gold pieces right off the bat. No one dares to outbid the king, so the auctioneer quickly congratulates him on the purchase. Blaine tells his son that the responsibility of raising the rare creature now falls entirely on him. Curtis promises to do his absolute best, and Queen Priscilla playfully asks if this means he will finally stop skipping his daily lessons. Back in the hallways, Arthur searches past the decorative bushes and display carts until he finally spots Sylvie. However, she is currently being examined by Sebastian, an older gray-haired man acting as the royal conjurer and bodyguard. Sebastian kneels on the red carpet and admires the tiny dragon, completely unaware of her true nature. Arthur steps forward and politely asks the man to return his partner. Sebastian assumes Sylvie is just an unlisted auction item and arrogantly declares that he has finally found a mana beast worthy of his immense abilities. He demands that Arthur leave the creature behind. Arthur flatly refuses and tells Sylvie not to wander off again. Frustrated by the sudden rejection, Sebastian insists that his status as a royal conjurer means he is the only one who can draw out the beast's full potential. He orders the boy to hand her over immediately and act grateful for the opportunity. Arthur completely ignores the demand and tries to walk away. This disrespect deeply angers Sebastian, who aggressively points his golden staff and unleashes a massive stream of fire directly at Arthur. The intense flames completely dissipate around Arthur without leaving a single scratch on his uniform. Sebastian then tries to use his royal authority to intimidate the boy, claiming that taking the beast is ultimately for the good of the country and its future. Arthur remains completely unfazed by the patriotic excuse, so Sebastian resorts to threatening Arthur's entire family, warning that they will be held entirely responsible for his blatant defiance. This specific threat pushes Arthur straight over the edge. His eyes glow with intense blue energy, and a terrifying aura of bloodlust erupts from his body. The overwhelming pressure instantly shatters the grand stained glass windows and fills the entire auction house with a suffocating red energy. Inside the main hall, King Blaine and his royal guards are instantly brought to their knees by the sheer weight of the killing intent. Vincent is pinned to the floor in agony, and Alice desperately shields the crying girls from the crushing pressure. Realizing his intense emotions just hurt the very people he wanted to protect, Arthur instantly retracts his dark aura. He finds Sylvie terrified by his sudden outburst and quickly apologizes for scaring her. Not long after the incident, King Blaine summons Reynolds to a private meeting in the main hall. The king is furious that the security team completely failed to catch the incredibly powerful intruder who caused the massive magical disruption. Reynolds kneels on the carpet and takes full responsibility for the security failure. The king states that this massive breach requires strict disciplinary action. However, Sebastian steps in and completely manipulates the situation to his advantage. He suggests that the king show mercy to Reynolds in exchange for a simple reward. Sebastian claims he has taken a strong interest in Arthur's pet and asks the king to seize it for him. King Blaine turns to Arthur and officially requests the beast, suggesting that having such a powerful conjurer as a partner would have prevented the security breach in the first place. Arthur formally apologizes but flatly refuses the king's request, stating he can never find a replacement for Sylvie. The royal guards are completely outraged by Arthur's blatant lack of respect, but King Blaine stops them from attacking. Refusing to take no for an answer, the king offers to directly trade the newly purchased world lion cub for the small black creature. He argues that reptilian beasts take far too long to mature and are generally much weaker than predators anyway. Arthur rejects the king a second time, making it absolutely clear that he will never sell or give Sylvia away to anyone. King Blaine feels his pride taking a massive hit after being casually rejected twice by a mere child. He demands the pet one final time. In response, Arthur asks the king a hypothetical question, wondering exactly how much gold it would take for the king to willingly sell his own children. The sheer disrespect of the question leaves the king entirely speechless and insulted. Sebastian uses the opportunity to order the royal guards to execute the arrogant boy for publicly humiliating the crown. Two armored knights charge right at Arthur with a spear and a sword. In a blinding flash of yellow energy, Arthur effortlessly strikes down both knights, leaving them unconscious on the patterned floor. Sebastian completely panics and calls the guards useless for failing to kill a child. Driven by his obsessive greed for the beast, he raises his golden staff and unleashes an even larger torrent of fire at Arthur. Realizing ordinary magic is useless here, Arthur taps directly into his advanced beast will. Glowing yellow marks appear under his eyes as he steps entirely outside the normal flow of time. The world instantly freezes around him. He calmly walks through the suspended flames and approaches the terrified royal conjurer. Arthur mercilessly crushes Sebastian's leg, dropping the old man to the floor in agonizing pain. Sebastian cries out for help, but Arthur casually reminds him that time is completely frozen, so no one can hear his desperate screams. Arthur strictly warns the royal conjurer to carefully consider his position before ever messing with him again. The intense physical strain of using such godlike magic instantly catches up to Arthur, and he completely loses consciousness, collapsing onto the floor right in front of the horrified king. The next morning, Arthur wakes up in his bedroom with a massive headache. He realizes that stepping outside the flow of time took a huge toll on his young body, and quickly concludes that he desperately needs more training to handle the overwhelming power. Alice comes into the room carrying a wooden bucket and is incredibly relieved to see him finally awake. She tells him that everyone was in a complete panic after he passed out at the auction. The doctor predicted he would wake up soon, but Alice used her emitter healing magic to speed up the recovery process anyway. Later that day, Arthur decides he needs a change of pace and goes shopping with his mother in the bustling town square of Xyrus City. The cobblestone streets are filled with colorful stalls and festive red banners. They stop at an accessory shop, and Alice suggests buying a pink heart-shaped clip for Eleanor. Arthur worries about spending too much money, especially since Reynolds might lose his security job over the auction house incident. Alice confidently brushes off the concern, revealing that she actually has a highly successful job of her own. She explains that her specialized healing products are incredibly popular with the local nobles and bring in plenty of money. She notes that Tabitha helped her set up the business connections, meaning the family is totally financially secure regardless of what happens to Reynolds. Back at the Helstea mansion, Vincent, Reynolds, and Arthur sit down for a formal meeting with a royal representative wearing a maroon suit. The representative formally apologizes on behalf of King Blaine for the entire violent ordeal. He places a heavy red bag of gold coins on the coffee table, calling it a genuine show of good faith to make up for the incident. The man explains that the two guards who attacked Arthur have been permanently fired from their positions. Reynolds is completely shocked that the men who actively tried to murder a child merely lost their jobs, but Arthur tells his father to just let it go. Arthur then asks what happened to Sebastian. The royal representative claims Sebastian was completely relieved of his duties and sent away for medical treatment. He explains that the official royal story is that the two guards' spells magically bounced back and accidentally shattered Sebastian's leg. The king absolutely refuses to admit that a small boy single-handedly defeated his elite royal conjurer, so they completely fabricated the story to heavily save face. The representative also gives Arthur a stern warning, advising him to learn some proper manners because not everyone in the world is as forgiving as King Blaine. Arthur accepts the apology and the gold, deciding to just play the part of the humble victim for now. Reynolds points out that Arthur was the one almost killed, but Arthur notes that the money will definitely come in handy for his future plans. He is also quietly satisfied with how badly he injured the arrogant conjurer. That night, Arthur sits alone in his dark bedroom and deeply reflects on the entire situation. He realizes that despite his immense magical talent, he is still severely limited by his childlike body. Defying the overwhelming power of whole nations requires a level of raw strength he simply does not have yet. He vows to find a way to significantly increase his physical and magical limits so he never has to feel this completely helpless again. The following day, Arthur travels to a lush green forest just outside the city. He runs along a dirt path with Sylvie resting on his shoulder. He tracks a large bird flying across the clear blue sky until he reaches a quiet clearing. An elderly woman wearing a purple cloak and a pointed black witch's hat stands waiting for him among the trees. She greets Arthur directly by his name and calmly tells him she has been waiting for his arrival. Arthur stands in an open field near Xyrus Academy, facing the elderly woman in the purple cloak. She introduces herself as Director Goodsky, the leader of the prestigious institution known for producing the kingdom's top scholars, royal guards, and military officers. Goodsky explains that she wants to see if Vincent was exaggerating about Arthur's magical abilities. Arthur knows she possesses incredible power and authority, so he decides to show off to prove his worth. He starts by casting a powerful wind spell, creating a swirling vortex of green magic and hurling large rocks at her. Goodsky casually suspends the rocks in midair with her own magic. Arthur admits his wind-fire power is weak compared to his fire and water skills. He immediately unleashes a massive barrage of orange flames and sharp golden energy shards. The two engage in an intense magical duel, filling the area with smoke and debris. Goodsky completely deflects the attack with a glowing green seal and counters with a massive wall of wind that sends Arthur flying across the grassy field. He crashes hard but tries to push himself back up. Goodsky is highly impressed by his combat skills but warns him not to lose consciousness. She conjures 2 spheres of teal energy and unleashes a massive shockwave. Arthur clutches his head in agony and realizes she is using sound magic, a very rare and unique element. Goodsky stops the attack and tells him he passes the test. She offers to teach him personally because of his wind magic, but she also notes that he can use earth magic and suspects he has even more hidden talents. Arthur admits he can use water magic too. Realizing she sees right through his act, he drops the pretense and bluntly negotiates. He tells her he needs her influence and authority to protect his family. In return, he promises to enroll at Xyrus Academy in 3 years, when he reaches the normal age for students, and vows to revere her as his master. Goodsky finds his blunt negotiation hilarious, noting that not even the Soppin royal family treats her this way. She asks why he wants to wait 3 years instead of getting stronger right now. Arthur explains he wants to live life to the fullest and explore the world as an adventurer first. Goodsky accepts the deal but tells him they will only finalize it once he convinces his family to let him go. Arthur returns home and uses Vincent as an intermediary to tell Reynolds and Alice about his powers and his plan to become an adventurer. Alice completely flips out and absolutely refuses to let him do something so dangerous right after they got him back. Arthur regrets not telling them the news himself. Eleanor begs him not to leave, and Alice insists he is far too young for a journey. Reynolds tries to calm Alice down, suggesting they at least hear the boy out, but Alice thinks he is crazy for even considering it. Arthur promises that it won't be a permanent journey and that he will return home every few months or even more frequently. He assures Eleanor he isn't leaving right away. Arthur explains that he wants to see the continent and experience the same adventuring thrill his parents did, noting that staying home just to train would be incredibly dull. In reality, he knows he needs real combat experience to protect them, but he keeps his true motives hidden so they won't worry. Alice demands no more secrets from him. Reynolds then proposes a compromise, suggesting Arthur can go if he travels with a chaperone they completely trust. They hold a meeting with their old adventuring party, the Twin Horns, gathering around a table full of food and drinks. Reynolds asks if anyone wants to chaperone his son. Adam immediately rejects the idea, stating that babysitting isn't his thing, and joking that Arthur would probably murder him in his sleep anyway. Angela and Helen agree with Adam, teasing Arthur for being a bit rude and unpleasant at times. Arthur defends himself, claiming he isn't that bad. Durden points out that watching Arthur grow up would actually be a great experience for them. Jasmine suddenly raises her hand and volunteers for the job. Everyone is shocked since she usually prefers working completely alone, even more than Adam does. Jasmine simply states she is doing it for Arthur's sake. Reynolds realizes Jasmine is the perfect fit. Since she is an augmenter with wind magic who recently reached the light orange core stage, her combat skills are exactly what Arthur needs. Durden agrees, noting his own large-scale spells are better for protecting groups. Arthur thanks the Twin Horns for their help, and he and Jasmine share a warm smile, finalizing the arrangement. With his chaperone decided, Arthur spends his days preparing for the journey. One evening, Lilia surprises everyone by successfully meditating and drawing in mana without Arthur's help. Eleanor complains that it isn't fair that she can't do it yet. Alice and Reynolds explain that Eleanor will likely awaken her core when she turns 7 or 8, assuming she works hard. Arthur secretly hopes Eleanor doesn't awaken too young, fearing it would draw unwanted attention to their family. Later, Arthur asks Reynolds if he can visit the Helsty auction house to pick out a sword for his upcoming Adventurers Guild exam. Reynolds agrees and takes him to the massive storage vault. Vincent tells Arthur to look around and pick whatever he needs. Arthur browses the vast collection of steel swords, daggers, and polearms. He struggles to find anything suitable because the standard weapons are designed for large adult augmenters, making them far too heavy and unbalanced for his small child body. As he searches past wooden crates and a large black cannon, he spots a long, heavy black staff resting on the floor. When he picks it up, he realizes the weight distribution is wrong for a staff and feels much more like a sword. Wondering if it requires elemental magic, Arthur channels his mana into it. The black exterior shatters, revealing a beautiful, glowing cyan energy blade. Arthur is stunned by the weapon. He decides to test its cutting power and swings the blade downward, effortlessly slicing a massive wooden barrel entirely in half. The blade then reveals a glowing inscription reading Dawn's Ballad W.K. Oiv. Arthur wonders who the craftsman could be. Suddenly, the sword magically adjusts its weight, balance, and grip length to perfectly match his small body. Arthur realizes this is incredibly rare. In his past life, he wielded many incredible swords, but weapons usually required the owner to infuse them with mana over a long period to adapt. This sword adjusted instantly, making it the perfect fit. Just then, Reynolds and Vincent walk in to tell him Alice is making dinner. Arthur quickly hides the glowing blade inside a dark scabbard and tells Vincent he wants to keep it. Reynolds notes the sword seems a bit off balance, but Vincent doesn't mind giving it away. He asks Jameson to check the inventory, and Jameson remembers an angry old man dumping the item at the auction house, shouting that no one was fit to use it. Multiple appraisers examined it and concluded it was just a sturdy, useless stick. Since it was just gathering dust in the inventory, Vincent happily tells Arthur to take it for free. Arthur is thrilled by the lucky find, completely tricking the adults, and secures Dawn's Ballad to his waist. For the next few years, Arthur enjoys his peaceful, everyday life with his family and the Helstius while constantly preparing for his departure. He makes checklists, spars with Reynolds using wooden swords in the garden, and practices his swordsmanship in his bedroom. 9 full years have passed since he reincarnated into this world. To celebrate his 9th birthday, the families throw a massive outdoor feast in the garden. Everyone gathers around large tables filled with roasted meat skewers, fish, bread, and a massive strawberry cake. The atmosphere is incredibly joyful. King Blaine's previous compensation gold provides plenty of financial security, allowing the families to relax. Alice's healing product business is also highly successful, meaning they don't have to worry about money. After the feast, everyone moves inside the mansion's living room to open presents. Alice gives Arthur a specialized black gauntlet featuring silver plating and 3 green gemstones. She explains that she personally enchanted the gems with her emitter healing magic, giving Arthur a reliable medical tool for his dangerous travels. Arthur thanks her and puts it on. Next, Vincent and Tabitha present a pair of gold rings from a jewelry box. One ring features a small red gemstone, while the other is plain. Vincent hands the gemmed ring to Alice and the plain ring to Arthur. He explains the rings are linked, so if Arthur's mana ever drops to a dangerously low level during a fight, Alice's ring will light up to alert her. Finally, Reynolds gives Arthur a highly expensive communication scroll featuring a red sigil. He explains that Arthur can use his mana to leave a voice message on the scroll, and Alice will be able to send one reply back. Arthur is deeply moved by the thoughtful presence and sincerely thanks everyone. He promises to work hard and stay safe so they never have to worry about him. Alice hugs him tightly, telling him she doesn't care about him gaining fame or wealth and only wants him to survive and come back home. Later that night, Arthur sits in his dark bedroom packing his green backpack, a white mask, and his new sword. He reflects on his current life and realizes how much he truly values his family and friends. Unlike his past life as King Grey, he now has people who genuinely love and support him, and he vows to fight with absolutely everything he has to protect that sense of security. Knowing he needs to become even stronger than he was in his previous life to achieve this, he equips his gear and walks down the grand marble staircase of the Helstea mansion. Reynolds tells him he looks like an S-rank adventurer, but gives him some final advice, warning him not to get cocky about his strength and reminding him to rely on Jasmine when things get too tough. Alice gives him one last hug, and Eleanor holds Sylvie, telling the small dragon to be a good girl on the trip. After saying his final goodbyes, Arthur steps out into the cool night air. He walks toward the front gate where Jasmine is already waiting for him in her dark green adventuring outfit. Arthur asks if she is ready, and they set off together as the sun begins to rise over the mountains, fully prepared to start his new life as an adventurer. Arthur and Jasmine walk into the Xyrus branch of the Adventurers Guild. The grand hall is massive, filled with people, and features large red banners hanging from the ceiling. Arthur wears a dark hooded coat, a backpack, and a white mask with blue markings over his face. He uses the alias Note to hide his true identity so the royal family does not target his real family. They approach a blonde receptionist behind a wooden counter. Jasmine tells the receptionist that Arthur is here for a rank assessment. The receptionist leads them down a hallway and opens a large wooden door. They enter a private office and meet Caspian Bladeheart, the chief of the Xyrus Guild branch. Caspian is a dark-haired man wearing glasses and a gray vest. He stands up from his desk and greets them. He tells Arthur that they can skip the usual written exam and Manicore confirmation because Jasmine recommended him. He mentions that Jasmine is an A-class adventurer, and her father has deep connections with the guild. Caspian asks for Arthur's name. Arthur tells him to use the name Note. Caspian shakes Arthur's hand, and a vibrant green magical energy glows between their hands. Caspian immediately realizes that Arthur is incredibly strong. They all head to the exam arena. While walking down the hallway, Sylvie peeks her head out of Arthur's backpack and yawns. She looks like a small black cat with bat wings. Jasmine explains to Arthur that her father is heavily involved with the guild. They reach the arena, a massive open-air stone structure with tall columns and tiered seating for spectators. A brown-haired girl named Diane Whitehall takes her practical exam first. She wears a blue and black robe and wields a glowing wand. She fights against a black-haired witch wearing a large pointed hat and a purple cape. Diane conjures a tall beam of blue magical energy and creates a large cloud of white smoke. The witch easily defends herself with her staff. She tells Diane that her mana use and incantation speed are good, but her defenses are too weak. She assigns Diane a C-class rank. A scarred man in silver armor calls the next examinee Elijah Knight. Elijah is a young boy with black hair and glasses wearing a gray shirt. The armored man suddenly stops the exam and announces that Elijah is officially a B-class adventurer without even taking the practical test. Arthur and Jasmine sit in the stands and feel very confused by this special treatment. Next, the armored man calls Lucas Wykes. Lucas is an 11-year-old boy with short white hair, pointed elf ears, and a highly arrogant attitude. He wields a twisted wooden staff with a red crystal. The armored man confirms that Lucas specializes in fire magic and is at the light orange core stage. Lucas arrogantly asks the witch examiner if he can skip the test and join A-class directly. The witch ignores his attitude and starts the exam. Lucas yells a command and unleashes a massive, towering pillar of orange flames around himself. He shoots a dragon-shaped fire blast straight at the witch, destroying the ground and creating a smoking crater. The witch defends herself by conjuring a large, green magical shield with her staff. Lucas leaps high into the air, bounces off a rock, and slams his staff into the ground, causing a massive, fiery explosion that rains embers over the entire arena. He sits on the ground, thinking he won. The witch praises his mana capacity and advanced fire spells, but she points out a flaw. Lucas gets angry and tries to launch a massive blast of fire at her while sitting down, even though the exam is already over. The witch easily blocks it and summons a giant stone hand from the ground. The stone hand grabs Lucas and lifts him into the air. The armored man yells at Lucas, stating that sneaking an attack after the exam ends is completely unacceptable. The witch tells Lucas his lack of control is his greatest weakness and assigns him a B-class rank. Lucas throws a massive tantrum, screaming that the exam does not count and threatening to tell his father about this. Arthur gets called next. Jasmine wishes him luck. Arthur steps onto the arena floor, and a surging dark purple aura envelops his body. The armored man checks his clipboard and gets confused because there is absolutely no information in Arthur's file. Suddenly, Caspian steps in and tells the guard to step aside because he will handle this examinee himself. The armored guard argues that it is unheard of for an AA-class sorcerer and guild chief to administer an exam personally. Caspian ignores him and draws his golden hilted sword. Arthur draws his own sword, and they get ready to fight. Caspian leaps forward, and their blades clash in a blinding flash of white light. They exchange rapid strikes across the dusty arena. Caspian moves incredibly fast and has flawless defenses. Arthur relies heavily on his sword skills and swings a blade engulfed in bright orange flames. They clash again, creating a massive burst of golden light and floating embers. Caspian warns Arthur not to get overconfident. After the fight, the blonde receptionist hands Arthur a small gold plate inside a black box. She congratulates him and officially registers him as a B-class adventurer. Meanwhile, Caspian sits in his office with the armored guard and the witch. The guard complains that promoting 3 children to B-class in a single day is completely unheard of. Caspian reminds them that the kingdom of Sapin recently lifted the ban on elf and dwarf adventurers. He explains that Lucas is a half-elf from the Wykes family, a group known for their questionable methods of producing powerful sorcerer children. He also explains that Elijah is a human boy raised by dwarves in the Darv kingdom. Elijah was sent as the first representative to get accustomed to humans, which is why he has a powerful guarantor backing him. The guards ask about Arthur. Caspian says they know almost nothing about him, but he knows Arthur's guarantor belongs to the Flamesworth family. The guards assume that is why Arthur's fire magic is so strong. Caspian corrects them, stating he was actually most impressed by Arthur's swordsmanship. He notes that Arthur's movements were awkward because his body is still growing, but he predicts Arthur will become terrifyingly powerful once he reaches adulthood. Later, Arthur and Jasmine walk down a busy hallway in the guild. Arthur spaces out and Jasmine asks if he is okay. Arthur admits that his duel with Caspian made him realize he has grown too accustomed to the magical powers of this world. He feels he is neglecting the diligent sword training that gave him strength in his past life. Elijah walks up to them and praises Arthur for stopping Caspian's attacks during the duel. Suddenly, Lucas interrupts the conversation. He grabs Arthur by the collar and aggressively tells him that they do not invite rule breakers to their get-togethers. He yells that there are different levels of power even within the same rank. A man and a woman step in and tell Lucas to stop causing trouble. Arthur and Jasmine completely ignore Lucas and decide to leave the guild to head to their next destination. They walk through a glowing blue portal and arrive in a lush green field surrounded by mountains. Jasmine explains that this is a beast pasture where lower-class adventurers come to train and gather materials. She tells Arthur they are just passing through and their actual destination is another day away. They decide to spar to pass the time. Jasmine draws her 2 short daggers and dashes forward. She moves incredibly fast, using her wind magic to enhance her speed. Arthur barely keeps up and realizes he severely underestimated her. He has to rely on the combat techniques from his past life to block her rapid attacks. They clash swords repeatedly, sending bright yellow sparks flying into the air. Suddenly, a massive plume of dark gray smoke and flying debris erupts from the nearby forest. A giant, dark brown boar monster with glowing red eyes and 4 massive white tusks bursts out of the smoke. It charges across the field, surrounded by dark, magical tendrils. Jasmine tells Arthur the monster is not native to this area and guesses it escaped from captors. The giant boar attacks a group of adventurers nearby, injuring several men. Jasmine yells at Arthur to run and charges directly at the massive beast. She leaps into the air and slashes the boar with her daggers, causing blood to splatter. However, her weapons barely leave a scratch on the boar's thick armor. The boar knocks her back, sending her flying through the air. Arthur rushes in and catches her before she hits the ground. The boar snorts and prepares to trample them. Arthur remembers his fight with Caspian and his vow to never be overconfident. He realizes he absolutely cannot afford to make a mistake here. He draws his glowing blue sword from its scabbard and pulls out his second blade. He channels his fire magic, leaping high into the air above the charging monster. He unleashes a massive, swirling pillar of orange and yellow fire. He swings his sword and delivers a powerful red energy slash straight across the boar's head, completely incinerating the beast in one massive strike. After the battle, the area returns to a peaceful green landscape. Jasmine walks up to Arthur and pinches his cheek hard. She scolds him for not looking more worried during the fight and asks how he figured out the monster's weakness so easily. That night, they set up camp and sit on a log beside a crackling campfire. Jasmine decides to share her past with Arthur. She explains that she became an adventurer specifically to get away from her family. The Flamesworth family prides itself on producing the strongest fire sorcerers in the kingdom. Jasmine awakened her magic core earlier than any of her siblings, so her parents had massive expectations for her. However, when they realized she had absolutely no talent for fire magic, they labeled her a complete failure. Hearing this makes Arthur furious. He yells that there is no natural hierarchy of elements, and that a mage's power depends entirely on how well they use their specific magic. Jasmine laughs at his sudden outburst, noting she has never seen him get so angry before. Arthur calms down and realizes her story triggered him because he was also called a failure in his past life as King Grey. Jasmine continues her story, explaining that joining the Twin Horns changed her life completely. They taught her how to cooperate and how to trust other people. She asks Arthur if he thinks he can change too. Arthur stands up and looks at the campfire. He thinks about his loving family and his friends. He reaches his hand toward the starry sky and tightly clenches his fist. He vows to change and become stronger so he can always protect the people he cares about. Meanwhile, far away in Elenoir, Tessia spies on Arthur using a large, glowing green magical orb. She sees Arthur sitting by the campfire with Jasmine and gets incredibly jealous. She strains to hold the heavy orb and eventually drops it, screaming that Arthur always has a different woman with him every time she checks on him. Her grandfather, Virion, walks into the room and catches her throwing a fit. He tells Tessia that if she is so jealous of Arthur taking on new challenges, she should start her own training instead of just watching him. He pulls out a thick, ornate blue book covered in golden symbols and hands it to her to study. 2 years pass. Rumors spread across the kingdom about a highly skilled fighter known as the Masked Swordsman. Arthur continues traveling with Jasmine, fighting monsters and gaining a massive reputation. He finally prepares to set out on his next major journey. Arthur and Jasmine arrive at the village they were assigned to investigate. They immediately notice that there are no people around anywhere. Arthur points out that there are footprints leading into the village but none leading out. Jasmine finds this extremely strange, especially since there are absolutely no signs of a struggle. They slowly walk through the abandoned area and spot a massive jagged blue crystal sitting on the grass. They get closer and are shocked to see a villager completely frozen inside the crystal. They look around the courtyard and realize that several other villagers are also encased in these giant blue crystals. Suddenly, they hear a noise and find a young girl in an orange dress hiding behind a building with a basket of herbs. They approach her and ask what happened. The little girl cries and tells them she was in the forest gathering herbs, and when she came back, everyone was trapped. Arthur figures out that a beast must have done this. Right at that moment, a massive, multi-eyed spider monster called an arachne ambushes them. The beast fires a thin blue beam of light that cuts right through the little girl's skirt. Jasmine immediately jumps into a combat stance. The arachne grabs a woman and hangs her upside down in front of its massive, glowing red eye. Jasmine realizes they are completely outmatched. She tells Arthur they need to run right now. They manage to escape the village and hide in the dense forest. Somewhere else, 2 hooded figures stand in a dark room illuminated by candles. They look over a detailed map of the Tri-Kingdom Alliance. The elderly figure notes that going with the flow of events can be pleasant. The other man uses green magic over the map and states that the young adventurers gathering in the Beast Glades are the future of the continent. They agree that they must prevent this future at all costs. The man with the goatee smiles and says he thought this task would be boring, but it actually has its charms. Back in the forest, Arthur and Jasmine crouch behind some bushes. Jasmine explains that the arachne is one of the top 5 beasts she never wants to fight. Arthur asks if she has ever fought one before. Jasmine admits she fought them 5 times but only managed to kill one, and it took her entire former adventuring party to pull it off. She mentions that Arthur's parents, Reynolds and Alice, were crucial in that fight. She explains that Alice's healing powers were the only thing that could break the arachne's curse. The only other way to break the curse is to kill the beast itself. Jasmine warns Arthur that arachne have incredibly high magic resistance, so most spells are completely useless against them. On top of that, their shells are so tough that normal swords just bounce right off. Arthur realizes they have no way to defeat the monster. Jasmine notes that arachne hate daylight and usually stay hidden deep inside dungeons, so it is strange to see one out here. She tells Arthur that she has taught him everything he needs to survive, so she asks him what their next move should be. Arthur answers that they should head back to the guild, report the beast, and return when they are fully prepared. Jasmine agrees with his plan. However, before they can leave, the massive arachne creeps up behind them. They leap away from the bushes just as the monster attacks. Arthur falls backward through a purple magical portal. The arachne traps Jasmine inside a massive block of jagged blue ice. Jasmine yells at Arthur to run away and save himself. Arthur refuses to leave her behind. He stares at the giant spider monster and grabs his swords. He remembers his past life as King Grey. He recalls being the strongest king in a world filled with advanced technology and powerful magic. He remembers slaughtering countless soldiers in a grand hall with just a single swing of his blade. He realizes that in this new life, swords alone will not be enough to win. He decides to combine his blade skills with his fire magic. The arachne fires a massive blast of white energy from its mouth. Arthur jumps through the air and slices the energy blast in half with his 2 swords. He lands on the monster's back and strikes it with his blazing swords, but his attacks barely leave a scratch. He remembers Jasmine warning him about the beast's magic resistance. He tries using earth magic instead. He summons massive, jagged rocks from the ground to impale the arachne. The rocks shatter harmlessly against the monster's tough shell. Arthur realizes that attacking from the outside is completely pointless. He comes up with a desperate plan. He charges at the arachne and dodges its massive legs. He jumps onto its back again and jams his sword deep into a small crack in its armor. He then unleashes a massive surge of raw magic directly inside the monster's body. The internal magic blast causes the arachne to explode in a blinding flash of yellow lightning. The beast shatters into countless glowing pieces. Arthur lands on the ground completely exhausted. He breathes heavily and admits that combining his old fighting style with this world's magic puts way too much strain on his young body. He realizes he is still far away from his goal and needs to train a lot more. Suddenly, his pet dragon Sylvie, currently looking like a small black kitten, jumps onto his head. She asks if he is okay because she felt his intense anger through their bond. Arthur smiles and assures her that he just got a little carried away, but everything is fine now. He gently holds Sylvie in his hands. Moments later, Jasmine approaches him holding a knife. She is furious that Arthur ignored her orders to run away. Arthur quickly apologizes for his recklessness. Jasmine points out that if he had died, his mother Alice would have been completely devastated. She tells him to never take such huge risks on her behalf again. Arthur looks her in the eye and says he cares about her too much to leave her behind. This makes Jasmine blush, and she gets completely flustered. She scolds him and pulls on his cheeks as punishment, telling him the only thing he is getting better at is talking. She finally lets go and sincerely thanks him for saving her life. Since the arachne is dead, the ice curse on Jasmine is permanently broken. Jasmine mentions they should collect the monster's mana core, but they just grab its massive yellow eye as proof of the kill. They head back to town and walk into a busy tavern. They meet up with a boy with glasses and the arrogant half-elf Lucas Wykes. The boy with glasses is shocked that they survived a fight with an arachne. Lucas laughs and calls Arthur a liar. He claims there is no way Arthur could defeat such a powerful monster and demands to see the mana core as proof. Arthur admits they did not get the core. Lucas immediately gets smug and says Arthur probably just fought a regular giant spider. Arthur completely ignores his attitude and slams the arachne's massive yellow eye onto the wooden table. The eye glows with a dark purple light. Everyone in the tavern stares at it in total shock. The boy with glasses recognizes it as a cursing eye of petrification and confirms it is the real deal. Lucas looks completely stunned. However, he quickly regains his arrogant attitude. He claims that even a beast like that would be no match for his own fire magic. Arthur sarcastically tells Lucas that he will be sure to call him for help next time. Lucas gets annoyed and storms out of the tavern. The rest of the group laughs at Lucas never changing. Jasmine tells Arthur that it is time for them to head back home. Arthur travels back to the floating city of Xyrus. He arrives at the massive Helsta mansion and is immediately greeted by his little sister Eleanor. She runs up and gives him a huge hug. Arthur's parents, Reynolds and Alice, are thrilled to see him. They sit down in the living room to hear about his adventures. Arthur casually mentions that he and Jasmine fought an arachne and were nearly killed multiple times. Alice immediately freaks out. She forces both Arthur and Jasmine to kneel on the floor in front of her. She furiously scolds them for breaking their promise to stay out of extreme danger. She yells at Jasmine for letting a child fight a top-tier beast. Jasmine keeps her head down and sincerely apologizes. Arthur tries to take the blame, explaining that he forced Jasmine to let him fight. Alice ignores his excuses and says she only allowed him to become an adventurer because Jasmine promised to keep him safe. Reynolds tries to calm Alice down. He points out that while the situation was dangerous, Arthur's victory is actually a massive accomplishment. Alice starts crying and says she just wants her son to come home safely. Arthur promises to be more careful and not make her worry so much. Later that day, Arthur and Jasmine head out to the courtyard to spar. Jasmine sets the rules and declares that they cannot use any magic. Arthur agrees, and they draw their wooden practice swords. They clash rapidly, trading heavy blows. Arthur realizes that he needs to sharpen his basic sword skills. During the intense spar, he reflects on his past life. He realizes that what he lacked back then is exactly what he wants to protect now. He wants the power to keep his loved ones safe. He vows to get stronger so he never has to experience loss again. The spar ends and Arthur thanks Jasmine for the match. He looks up at the sky and suddenly remembers his childhood friend Tessia. He wonders what the elf princess is up to these days. Far away in the Elven Kingdom, Tessia stands on top of a massive boulder wedged between two jagged cliffs. She is covered in dirt and surrounded by a thick cloud of dust. She screams in total frustration because nobody warned her that her training was going to be this brutal.